Good evening and welcome. This is a regular meeting of Princeton Planning Board on October 19th, 2023. Pursuant to Section 13 of the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of the time and place of this meeting has been given by prominently posting the resolution of regularly scheduled meetings of the Planning Board of Princeton for February 2023 through January 2024. A copy was filed with the Clerk of Princeton on January 17th, 2023. Legal notice on the adoption of said resolution was published in the January 13th, 2023 edition of the Princeton Packet. Notice of this meeting also has been posted to the municipal website, princetonnj.gov/calendar. Notice that all regular and special meetings of the Princeton Planning Board will be held electronically via Zoom, was transmitted to the Princeton Packet and the Times, and was filed with the Clerk of Princeton on Tuesday, January 17th, 2023. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. Since we're not taking public comment tonight, I won't read the 3 paragraphs that relate to public comment, and ask Carrie that you just call the roll, please.
Ms. Capizoli?
Here.
Mr. Chow? Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Mr. McGowan?
Here.
Carrie, are you there? I'm not the only one not hearing
No.
Carrie, am I?
No, she got to me
Yeah.
and she disappeared.
Hi, I'm sorry.
I flipped into an alternate
No, it's
universe.
just you, Louise. You're the only one.
Ah,
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So Carrie, the last person whose name I heard you call was Mr. McGowan. And he said here.
Mr.
And-
Quinn?
Thanks.
here.
Ms. Sachs?
Here.
Mr. Texardi?
Here.
Mr. Taylor, he might be an attendee. I don't see him there. Mr. Bodeckheimer?
Here.
Mrs. Wilson?
Here.
We have a quorum.
And
Great.
He
Mr.
is in
O'Donnell is here too.
attendees. Jack is in attendees.
He would be John Taylor.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Announcements? I don't think that we have any, I don't have any announcements tonight. Does any other member of the board or staff have announcements?
Jeez.
Okay, committee reports?
Yeah, the site plan subcommittee met on Wednesday, and we reviewed modification of an approved site plan for 301 North Harrison Street, which is the shopping center. We felt it was minor, and we recommended that it go through an administrative approval. So I think there'll be a certain amount of days where one can comment.
Yeah, Mr. Lesko, can you just quickly go over the process? I think it gets published and then there's a 10-day, well, you talk.
Certainly. So the task of the site plan committee was to classify the application as major or minor. If they classified it as minor, as they did, they also recommend approval to the chair.
Right.
The applicant in the next few days will send out notice to the neighbors and publish in the newspaper. There's a 10-day period where any such persons aggrieved by the decision can put in writing to our office to essentially bump the decision up to a planning board hearing. So that'll come soon.
Okay, great. Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Sorry, David.
No worries. The landscape subcommittee also met this week on Tuesday morning, and we reviewed updates to the landscape plans for 217 Witherspoon Street, and found the revisions to be in line with the approval that was granted by the planning board. So that project is ready to go through compliance.
Great. Thank you. So that's it for subcommittee reports. Let's look at minutes. We have two regular meeting minutes, sets of minutes, one from May 18th, 2023. Are there any edits or suggestions or questions about those? And if not, would someone like to move them?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. McGowan. Seconded by Mr. Cohen. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any abstaining? Okay. The next set of minutes is from June 1st, 2023. This is also a regular meeting. Any questions or comments on those? And if not, would someone like to move them?
I'll move them.
Thank you, Ms. Capizzoli. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Taylor. And the record should show Mr. Taylor is here. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstaining? Thank you. Next up, we have a discussion and presentation on the Princeton Community Master Plan update. And so the entire rest of the meeting will be devoted to this topic, and including a detailed presentation by our planning director and consultants, and then Q&A with the board. I just want to quickly start by thanking planning director Justin Lesko and the consultant team led by Clarke Caton Hintz and the steering committee and the thousands of people who have participated in the process. And in a few minutes, we'll hear a lot more from Justin about that process, but suffice to say that if you in the public filled out surveys or shared your thoughts in any way, formally or informally, over these last many months, your voice was heard, and we really appreciate your input. There'll be an opportunity at our public hearing on November 9th at 7 o'clock, also via Zoom, as all our meetings are, for members of the public to pose questions and give testimony. Tonight's meeting, as I have already said, I guess twice, does not include public comment, but this meeting will be available by video starting, could it be available on the website starting tomorrow? Justin, could it be posted tomorrow before the weekend?
Certainly, we normally follow up almost immediately, so
Okay.
we could do that.
Great.
Yep.
So I'm sure the presentation tonight will bring to mind a lot of questions, both for board members and for members of the public. And in the coming days, and maybe in the presentation, we'll learn a little more about exactly when, but the plan in its entirety, the near final plan, will be available for the public to review and digest. And we thought it was important to have that available to the public before we take any kind of public comment. This meeting is not a required meeting under the municipal land use law. This is a meeting we're choosing to have in order to really roll out the plan in a comprehensive way and give the board a chance to begin to deliberate. Some details in the plan could change as a result of board deliberations and public comment. So I'm considering this the near final plan. And with that, and thank you for your patience, I will turn things over to Justin Lesko.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll share my screen. I have a short PowerPoint, and then I know our consultants will go into further detail. I'm mostly speaking about how we got here and the process and what that's been. But just to begin, again, my name is Justin Lesko, and I'm the planning director. We're here tonight to speak about the master plan. And kind of to reiterate what the chair said, this really isn't a council. It's not similar to a council ordinance introduction where there's a first reading and you have everything on file and then it's followed by a hearing later. Really, the only requirement under the state law, the municipal land use law, is to have a hearing and just have the application on file 10 days before. We're hoping to, on top of doing all this meeting, but we're hoping to have that final document even more than 10 days before, so towards the end of October. And we really, wanted to take this opportunity to add an additional presentation to discuss the big points of the plan, give out some information on them before that final document goes out, and really build off of the open house that we had a month ago. We are still putting the final touches on the plan, and I'll get into why that is. So first off, you may have seen this slide before. This is the way I like to break down what a master plan is in New Jersey for those in attendance. This may be the first meeting here. It's really three big things to me. It's a legal document in New Jersey. Every municipality has to have one. There are certain requirements that have to be in it, certain things that can be in it. And every municipality has to re-examine it at least every 10 years now. This is a little different from the way other states do it. If you're really a master plan buff here, that reads everything else coming out. But this is the way it's done in New Jersey. And then secondly, it provides guidance for the council when they're creating ordinances, particularly land use ones, when they're deciding how to allocate funds for things like studies or priorities, and how they direct staff as well. And in addition, it's guidance for the planning board and the zoning board when you are deciding on applications before you. And third, and I think most importantly, a master plan is a vision for and by the community. There's a requirement to have a vision in there, so it's not just flowery language that I'm saying, but it's that vision, and that's why we've done what we've done for the past year and a half to make sure it's not just me sitting behind my desk typing it up and then bringing it to you 10 days before a hearing, passing it, and then we move on, but to make sure we're really getting as many people involved as we can. So here's how we got here, kind of sequentially. The consultant or having a consultant to go through this process was funded by council in 2020. So even though the master plan is a planning board document, it was funded by council. We had a request for proposal created in 2021, and I'll get into more about that. And we brought Clarke Caton Hintz on at that time. The process began in 2022, and here we are in 2023, hopefully ending it and bringing it to adoption. So the better part of 4 of these years. Here's some information about our current master plan. The last real plan overhaul was in 1996. For further context, in 1996, there were 2 Princetons, even though we had a regional planning board. Gas cost $1.23 a gallon. And pretty amazingly, the Dallas Cowboys were Super Bowl champions. Throughout those 27 years, we've had elements amended and readopted, I think 29 actions by my count in those 27 years. Though the policy statements within a lot of those elements are still from 1996. And again, just to kind of belabor the point, we're as close to 2050 as we are to 1996. There are other things, you could maybe consider inconsistencies. We have a land use plan map from 1996, but a land use plan element most recently adopted in 2009, for example. We have goals that were readopted in 2005 that you see to the right, but they're still reflecting the goals from 1996 to 2001. So with that being said, we didn't look at this, and we being the planning board, master plan subcommittee, myself, the consultants, we're not disruptors coming in saying, let's throw the whole plan out, start from scratch, it's a new day. But really we're using it as the starting point for our new plan, as was done with the 1989 plan that fed into the 1986 one, the 1980 plan that fed into the 1989 one. And really the main goal is to update everything at once and be able to align things in a way that is different than having a vision statement and community values from 1996 and elements from 10 or 20 years later, not all at the same level. So to get more into this specific process, like I mentioned, there's a master plan subcommittee of the board, as you know, and we had meetings with them in April 2021, where we looked at other plans from around the country and the state, and ultimately we had a desire out of those meetings to create a plan that's actionable, that we can track, and that's easy to understand for anyone who's looking to pick it up. Coming from that, we created a request for proposal, looking at ones, again, from around the country and around the state, but tailoring them to Princeton. We had 7 firms formally submit in June and July 2021, and Clarke Caton Hintz was chosen as our consultant. They actually completed one of the plans that we looked at as a good example, so it was a little, it worked out that way, that we were holding one up as the standard we wanted, and the group that did it applied. But not only that, they're based out of our county. They have 40 years of experience doing municipal planning in New Jersey, and they also have experience working in Princeton with our third round housing element. So after bringing them on board, we had a March 2022 kickoff meeting with staff and planning board leadership, and that was almost a year and a half ago. And one of the things that we did in this process was, in addition to the planning board master plan subcommittee made up of planning board members, we created a master plan steering committee to guide the process and represent a diversity of viewpoints and life experiences in Princeton. And you'll see on here, you probably recognize a good amount of the names, and there's a little bit next to them about, maybe where they're coming from. But really, I think all these people on this list are multi-hyphenates on top of just what's on here. It might be a small business owner that's also a baker, an author, and a resident, a historian that's also an educator, a member of the Historic Commission and a resident, a school board member that's a carpenter and a former university administrator, and a resident as well. So these folks have been guiding the process along, and I'll get more into what that looks like. Before that, though, one of the first things that was done was the consultant looked at all these existing documents that we have in Princeton. Again, we're not trying to throw anything out. The slide might look empty right now, but it started with our master plan. Again, all those elements that were just mentioned, as well as other adopted municipal documents like historic district nominations, as well as the environmental resource inventory, the 2017 parking study, and the 2017 bike mobility study, neighborhood character, and all other municipal documents. On top of that, studies that were completed during the process were also looked at, like the Special Improvement District 1. And of course, we're not an island here, so we looked at documents from our community partners, including Sustainable Princeton, Princeton University, NJ Transit, and the public schools. And I'm going to go a little out of order here. This isn't quite sequential, but just to show all the things that are kind of in the hopper feeding into this plan. One of those is technical interviews that Clarke Caton Hintz myself had with staff. These were 2-hour meetings with questions sent in advance on individual elements that we'll get into later. Really left it up to staff for how they wanted to operate. For example, the open space manager gathered information from groups and relayed that back. The rec chair was in a meeting and another rec board member submitted written information. An HPC member was in a meeting with the historic preservation officer, and other groups brought multiple staff members, including ones with a very specific expertise like our sewer engineer. Back to that steering committee. We've had 6 steering committee meetings on Zoom. They've all been open to the public and recorded. They're on our YouTube channel if you'd like to see them. They were nearly monthly from May to the end of 2022. And then there was a shift to subcommittees of that group that looked at an element or two and really focused in on what would eventually become the content within the plan and within those elements. We had 3 rounds of meetings for those and 22 meetings here. If you're a math person, you might say that doesn't really make sense, particularly because we had 5 groups, but some of them required more meetings, and we were happy to do so to really, make sure we were putting in thought into this document. We also gave presentations and updates at different boards, commissions, and committee meetings, as well as community groups, not necessarily within the municipal government, like Witherspoon Jackson Neighborhood Association and Unidad Latina en Acción, where we received input back either from those groups, as a board, or as a committee, or just individuals from those groups sent in information and had conversations as well. And I would just like to point out that there's a significant amount of overlap between all of the different groups, whether it's the municipal ones or not, as well as the steering committee, the master plan subcommittee, and the planning board members here themselves. On top of that, we did a good amount of public outreach, including tabling at things like Sustainable Princeton's E-Commuter Fest and the police department's Trunk or Treat. 2 years running now. That's actually, we put the candy with cards to tell people to take our survey. Made them work for it a little. St. Paul's Parish Fest below, the YWCA celebration, and just general tabling in Heinz Plaza. We also went around and put up flyers for things like the surveys and the open houses at kiosks and bus stops, but also within businesses, which was not only a good opportunity to get a sign in their window, but speak to the business owners themselves, and maybe a customer that was overhearing and wanted to get in the conversation. Unintentionally, it also allowed us to receive feedback on signs like this. On top of that, we utilized the municipality's social media and email lists from community groups to get the word out and reach more people. And we also, this process has been documented through traditional media, the newspapers and sites in town, either through op-eds, through articles, press releases we put out, and even a radio broadcast. So then moving on, we've had an engagement hub set up. It's still up, engage.princetonmasterplan.org. A lot of the documents that I'm about to mention are still on there. Feel free to check that out. And this has updates on things that are coming up, the library of documents, calendar. You can see what we've done in the past, as well as the remaining couple events. So one of the things that we've done in this plan is, and I know Michael will get into this, so I'm probably stealing some of his thunder, is have our first ever economic development element. And to do so, we brought on a sub-consultant, the Joe Getz group, and they have a proprietary methodology for an economic analysis. It included site visits and walking tours from the group, stakeholder interviews, merchant interviews, and a consumer survey with those yellow signs that had nearly 4,000 responses, as well as a student survey of both seminary students and Princeton University students, and there were about 500 responses there. That analysis is available on our engagement hub and is feeding into that economic development element. We also conducted community visioning surveys. When we put the RFP out in 2021, I think it was actually between my first and second COVID shots. So if you could remember that time, we were still really unsure of what was going on, if we were in a pandemic or if we were in a post-pandemic environment. So we wanted to not just be prepared for both, but take best practices from both. And these community visioning surveys were one piece of that, where we received a little less than 1,000 responses to the first one. And then the second one built off of that in terms of questions, but it also had about 1,500 responses. And those reports, again, are available on the engagement hub. We've also had 2 open houses. They have both been well attended. The first one was at the library in November 2022. And then the second one was at 400 Witherspoon last month. We had Spanish translators, as you see. Luckily, this municipal staff has been great and very helpful. People from other departments filling in where they can. And we also had, really, they were structured to have boards around the room that people could respond to. The first one was a little more activity-based, whereas the second one was a little more reflective of what we've gathered. And those are both contributing to the report as well. And then one thing that we didn't initially set out to do, but we decided to add in throughout the process, were these listening sessions. And really, it was for us as staff to listen and take notes on folks and bring them to the master plan consultant and the steering committee, particularly from folks that we might not have heard from in some of those other ways, by making it convenient for them to come or to be able to attend these kind of smaller meetings. One of them was on Zoom, so maybe people who were putting the kids to bed or had mobility issues. One of them was Spanish language. Others were throughout town that might have just been easier to get to. And at whether it was noon on a Monday, noon on a Saturday, 9 a.m. Saturday, nighttime, and we had about a little over 200 people attend the 10 sessions. And And then, of course, there were follow-up emails after it, people that had, either wanted to continue to relay a point they made or didn't get a chance to speak and wanted to submit that. So we considered that as well. So overall, from the survey respondents and the attendees at the open houses and the listening sessions, we had over 7,000 responses. That's not counting, in hindsight, I wish we could have gone in and counted, but maybe it wouldn't have even been possible. But the people that were at those boards and commission meetings or at the steering committee meetings in attendance, all the technical interviews we had, the Joe Getz economic analysis interviews, the tabling events, and all those other things that I had mentioned. Again, we threw them all into the hopper to get what the feedback that we needed to get into what Michael is about to speak about. And with that being said, I will turn it over to Michael Sullivan. He is a principal at Clarke Caton Hintz out of Trenton with 30 years of experience himself in comprehensive planning, as well as a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners and a licensed planner in New Jersey. He's also a licensed landscape architect, and he's been the lead on this master plan.
I just want to quickly break in and say, for the benefit of the public, there are 57 members of the public who are observing the meeting. Just FYI. Mr.
And
Sullivan?
I don't know if we said this before, but we were not going to talk about the Phillies game for those that were interested in watching. I think we might have just got a bump. Maybe the game ended, so that might be why we had a few more people.
Michael Sullivan, I think you're up. You're on mute, though.
I'm trying to share my screen. There we go. Is my screen shared?
Yes.
Terrific.
It's not quite. Can you move to presentation mode or something? I'm not sure.
Yeah, these are a different format than Justin's, so it allows me to zoom, so I can zoom into things.
Okay.
Sort of like a hand-done Prezi presentation.
If you press the escape button on your keyboard, if you're using a computer, that sometimes helps too.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Justin. I really appreciate it. That was a good intro, particularly the way you talked about me. That was I appreciate that experience. But yeah, I'm Michael Sullivan. I'm a planner and principal with Clarke Caton Hintz in Trenton. We're planners, architects, and landscape architects, and the firm's been around for almost 50 years, and I've been there since 1998. Before that, I was a planning director in Ocean City, New Jersey. Drafted numerous plans, urban design plans, zoning regulations, and redevelopment work, all under the umbrella of planning, including expert testimony. For the last 25 years, my practice has been primarily as a consultant to municipalities throughout New Jersey, doing all the things that urban towns and medium towns and rural towns need to do. So that's where we come from, and we have a great team at Clarke Caton Hintz. Elaine Clisham has been a key person on this, planner. Tristan Harrison, another planner, and Jeff Vaughn, a landscape architect who wishes he was a planner. So we've got a good team, and we're thrilled to be have been working on this with Princeton and bringing it to a point of decision making. We've been joined as a prime consultant by Susan G. Blickstein, a planning firm that really managed the public engagement part of this, including the hub and the community survey work. And also, as Justin talked about before, JGSC, the market consultant, with their proprietary system of distilling what's going on in the marketplace. And it was a very robust study that they did, which has informed this process. I do want to thank Justin. We've talked pretty much every week for the past year and a half, roughly, to coordinate, schedule, and develop the approach to this master plan and to get it done. And that's been a lot of work on your part too, including all the outreach that he just shared with you, that much of which he's done with his staff on his own. So it's been terrific. And also the master plan steering committee and the subcommittees It has been a great experience to be steeped in this world with people who are so thoughtful, engaged, and passionate about trying to do what's right for Princeton, and not just what they want to do. These are the folks who are representing all the folks of Princeton, all the residents of Princeton. So they've been great representatives, and really appreciate the work they've done. So without further ado, I'm going to begin to go through the plan and some of our and the elements. Sorry. The first thing is that we developed is the overall vision. And we think this is very important, and it's a key piece of the master plan. And this vision is not much different from many towns, but it's important to state this because this is the point where everything flows from this. So Princeton of the future will be livable, beautiful, healthy, and accessible, diverse, inclusive, and equitable, rich in community facilities and services, historic, unique, vibrant, and internationally recognizable. I don't think many other towns can say they're internationally recognizable, but Princeton certainly can. Economically strong and adaptable, a global center for educational achievement, sustainable, resilient, and carbon neutral, and affordable to households at all income levels. And that's a really, really important set of aspirational goals for the vision of Princeton. The assumptions really go behind this. There are assumptions that underpin the master plan. Without the assumptions, we don't know where to go. The assumptions are that Princeton will grow and will welcome new growth, that its reputation as a global center of educational achievement will continue. Its quality of life and quality of place is a result of a unique set of characteristics of assets, high quality neighborhoods, business districts, robust economy, and extensive intact historic fabric, high quality schools, open space, and that Princeton needs more housing, particularly small dwelling units. There's also assumptions that there will be increasing and sometimes conflicting demands within the streets and the network of thoroughfares within Princeton, and that needs to be managed in a way that benefits the residents and visitors. The changing climate will continue to present a threat, and its effects will land disproportionately on vulnerable populations. And Princeton is committed to providing equal and equitable access to all of the benefits that derive from its land use policies. Before getting into the plan, it's important, I think, and some of the work that we've done is really analyzing demographics and other statistical things related to Princeton, which give you a picture of what's happening in the community beyond just looking at land use and the other physical attributes. Princeton's population in 2021 was estimated by the American Community Survey to be 30,700 roughly folks. Since the merger of the former borough and township, Princeton's population has grown approximately 7%, more than 4.6%, which is New Jersey's overall population growth. Much of that growth took place between 2015 and 2017, but between 2017 and 2020, the population grew slower, and there was a drop in population between 2020 and 2021. So roughly you're at 2017 levels. The DVRPC, which is a metropolitan planning organization, which has Princeton within its jurisdiction, estimated that in 2016, that by 2045, there would be 32,360 people in Princeton, a 5.3% increase from 2021. But their estimate did not account for the units that were coming online due to Princeton's third round housing plan settlement, which is projected to bring approximately 1,100 new units to the municipality by 2025. When the growth numbers are broken out more specifically by age cohort, it becomes clear that the high school and college age adults make up a significant portion of the population, as would be expected when you have a university and other higher education institutions in your jurisdiction. But the number of adults ranged in the age cohort from 25 to 44, the age range that typically has children under 18 in a household is much smaller than the residents age 45 and older. That's 19.5% of the 25 to 44-year-olds versus 36.3% of the population is 45 and older. So Princeton is getting older. The younger population, absent the college kids, is getting smaller, and the age groups that are older are getting greater. The consolidated Princeton has also gotten more diverse. The number of residents who identified as Asian American has increased, and Hispanic or Latino has increased slightly from 5.9 to 6.3%. So that's demographics, ages, and a little bit of so households and housing. Princeton has roughly 10,200 housing units. Almost 75% of those are single family or two-family homes. More than half were built before 1960, and 25% were built prior to 1940. So this is an older housing stock. Almost 2/3 have 3 or more bedrooms, and the trend since 2013 is for larger houses with respective bedrooms. The proportion of the municipality housing stock that has 3 bedrooms has dropped 20% from 27.3% of all units to 21.9% of units, while the portion that is 4 or more bedrooms has grown 12.6% from 36.6% of all units to 41% of all units, roughly. So what does that mean? That means that household size, which is the average size is 2.69 people, are now stuck looking at houses which have more bedrooms than they probably need. And this is driving at the affordability issues that people are having with affording houses in Princeton. People are having to buy up more house than they need based on their family size. So that's something we need to look at. So with that primer, let's talk about the land use plan element. The land use plan element is really the basis for the community's zoning, okay? I probably said this in subcommittees, but I'll say it here, is that I call it the big toe of the master plan foot or feet, I guess. And that's a reference to a sitcom. So, but the land use plan provides a framework and for the zoning. So it essentially provides a roadmap for how the zoning and the intensity of land uses and the different types of land uses are going to occur in the future. This particular land use plan provides a framework that unifies and reconciles Princeton zoning, which was split previously by the borough and township, and those distinctions remain today. So this plan element tries to solve those. It addresses the redundancies and conflicts in the zoning code that are a result of the consolidation of the former borough and township in 2013. And it strives for continued stewardship of the most cherished aspects of Princeton's community fabric, like neighborhood character, historic preservation, open space, but it plans for accommodating growth and the implementation of sustainable practices and providing the lands and facilities necessary to serve residents, businesses, visitors, and workers, and students. I forgot the students. So the slide you're looking at is existing land use or existing zoning. And the existing zoning in Princeton, I'm sorry, it's a little bit of a lag there on the internet. The existing zoning in Princeton largely reflects the existing land use patterns. And just so to give you a sense, the yellows and the browns and the oranges are residential districts. The red and the pinks, the reds are commercial districts, and the gray are office research districts, and the blue are educational districts. So you can see how the concentration of the darker yellows and oranges is around the core, the downtown Nassau Street and the university, with the lighter yellows, which represent lower density development and also lower density zoning on the outskirts of the downtown. You can see, as I talked about, reconciling the zoning, we had to do a colorized version of the zoning, the existing zoning, and we almost ran out of colors. There's so many zones when you combine these towns. So this gives you an idea about the problem we're trying to solve here. And we think we are solving it. At least we do. This is an enlargement of the downtown with the zoning map, and you can still see roughly the outline of the former borough. Let me see if I can. Pardon me. I'm gonna move the faces. You can see the former outline of the borough right in there, if you look. But you can see that there's a lot of zoning going on here, and you can see the red or the commercial districts around Nassau Street and on Witherspoon, and then the shopping center up here, and then some of the other business districts. You can also see getting down towards South Alexander Street there. So the overall goals for the land use plan are to create a unified and harmonized zoning ordinance for the municipality, focus higher residential density within the downtown and its immediate environs, and mixed-use centers with a progressively lower densities on the outside, moving away from downtown, to remove regulatory barriers to increasing and develop residential density and growth in appropriate areas by amending the zoning regulations. The zoning regulations are tremendously complicated in Princeton. And I think some folks may have trouble even understanding them, but in a lot of ways, they may suggest that certain things are possible, but the reality is that they are designed in a way that stymies growth. And so that's one of our big goals. Provide greater opportunities for economic development by expanding permitted land uses within the commercial districts in the downtown. Protect and expand green features, including parks and open spaces, and melding these with growth. A green as we grow approach. I didn't coin that. There's a very special person on the subcommittee that reduce the cost of development and increase investment by streamlining permit review when possible and the approval procedures. As I said, the zoning ordinance is complicated, and that actually makes it harder for folks to move through the process. But if there are other ways to streamline permitting and the approval process, that's part of this recommendation. While we grow in Princeton with land use, we want to protect all the environmentally sensitive features and natural resources by steering most growth away from those resources. We also want to improve climate resiliency and resilience to natural hazards, which are going to be exacerbated as the globe heats up and more rain can fall, and larger storms and other things. The other key points are that we want vibrant and viable mixed-use centers, consolidation, harmonization, but also looking at aging in place and multi-generational housing opportunities. With the housing affordability crisis in this country, we're seeing more multi-generational housing, and folks want to age in place, not necessarily in the 4-bedroom house they raise their family in, but in something smaller than that. So we're looking at that. And also looking at developing what's called the missing middle. The missing middle refers to that stretch of smaller residential typologies between the single family dwelling and the multifamily mid to high rise dwelling. So we're going to talk about that. Oh, I jumped ahead. So there's the missing middle. So this is the missing middle diagram. It's not something we produce. Hang on. So we do cite, this is Opticos firm out in California, in Oakland. But this shows you what we're talking about with missing middle. At the left side, you see detached single family homes, which is 70% of Princeton, roughly. And then at the far right, you see the mid-rise, which, you know, you could look at Avalon and say that's Avalon. Okay. In the middle, you see duplexes, fourplexes, courtyard buildings, cottage courts, townhouses. and various multifamily forms here. So this plan wants to grow not by coming in and creating mid-rise development everywhere. It wants to come in and it wants to sensitively and thoughtfully allow for the integration of this missing middle section here. And there's a precedent for that within Princeton. And so when we talk about this, we can see in these 6 examples here, these are examples within Princeton of a twin on Jefferson Street, 4 old early 20th century townhomes on Mercer Street. This is a university project or multifamily apartments, 3.5 stories on Prospect, which is a very great character in scale. And then you see on Wigan Street, we've got a multifamily home, which is actually a former single-family home that has been parceled down so that it's been divided up into apartments, but it still retains that graceful, grand single-family character. Same with this 5-unit on Wiggins. You might go by it and you might see 2 doors on Wiggins Street, but if you look closely, you'll see that there's 5 meters, energy meters on the side of it. So you see that. And then shops, apartments over shops. This happens to be at Nassau Moore Street, and the scale of shops and apartments can vary based on the intensity and the character of the district. So this is what we're talking about. We're not talking about redevelopment. We're talking about sensitive, intelligent, incremental infill and allowing this to happen within neighborhoods at a scale and a spatial character that reflects the neighborhood spatial character that everybody desires within those neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm. And Michael, if I could just jump in real quick.
And this is,
oh,
sure.
Sorry. So I just want to clarify one thing, that comes up a lot, and I think even came up the other night at the meeting that was held. When we're talking missing middle in the context of land use, right here, we're talking about structures. So this is a little different from area median income or middle class or anything like that. But the idea behind it is one that we already have in Princeton, or we've had. Frankly, it made Princeton what it is, of allowing these smaller structures that one person household or 2 people starting out can live in, and begin to plant roots here. It essentially creates choices, not just for people and where they want to live, but for property owners with their properties right now, where until only a few years ago, the only other option that could happen with that property would be a tear down and a rebuild. And we see that throughout town. We've added a second option in most of our residential zones with accessory dwelling units, but this would be talking about allowing or creating opportunities for other options in certain areas. And just to go through some of these pictures, which I took them all, which is great. A lot of other places only can use that missing middle chart above, or maybe take pictures of a place like Princeton and put them there. But the duplex on Jefferson, that was in the former township, so that's actually a non-conforming use. Couldn't build that today. The 4-unit on Mercer Street, I'm not sure off the top of my head what zone that's in, but even the residential zones that allow what we call attached dwelling units or apartments in the former borough, the R4 as a permitted use, the R3 as a conditional use, only allow you to have 3 per building. So you wouldn't be able to even build that. As Michael said, I looked up the historic maps, that Wigan Street one, which I love driving up to every day, especially this time of year. It's 6 units. It was at 1.1. The one in the middle, I probably would have never noticed that that's more than 2 units, but my cousin and her wife live there. So I've had dinner there, and I know that. And then, of course, the shops, the picture over Tipple and Rose is pretty common in the Nassau Street area.
Oh, my turn?
Yep, please.
Okay, thanks. That's good. I like the information. That's even deeper than I needed to get into. So when we talk about this too, when we talk about density and increasing intensity and growth, The diagram you see here, this is called the transect, and it's an urban land institute sort of staple about how to talk about density and growth and these progressively different areas. So this goes from the far right, from the most intense land use to the left with the least intense and the more natural zone. So Princeton's existing land use pattern and zoning largely reflect this, but in an organic way. This is the diagrammatic way, but you reflect that. The original settlement of Princeton, right, you know, at the top of a hill, basically, at the intersection there, away from the stream corridors and away from, and then it radiates out from that mixed use downtown. So that's part of the plan, is to follow that in an organic way that adapts those principles to Princeton. So let's talk about actually land use plan. We have developed, this plan includes, and we've developed generalized land use categories so that we can clearly see this relationship. And this starts with the reds and the dark oranges at the center of town, and it radiates out as the colors become more faded in terms of the yellows and reds and oranges of residential from the downtown, with the highest densities and the highest intensity of use and the most planned growth within those areas around the downtown, with far less planned on the outside of those areas, for good reason. And we've characterized these land use districts in a way that tries to reflect what they actually are. So going from the least dense relatively to the most dense, the yellow is what we call the Greenway neighborhood. Has lots of open space and large lot development, and still retains lots of natural character. The neighborhood, which is the, if you can see my cursor, well, maybe you can't, but the orange color, the lightest orange color, that's the neighborhood, and those are largely single-family neighborhoods, but they're slightly higher density than the yellow. And then getting into the central neighborhood, and the central neighborhood is the darker orange, which really wraps around Nassau Street, the schools, the shopping center, and butting up against the university. That's really the higher density existing single family and some other mixed dwelling types in there. And then the multifamily neighborhoods are shown in brown. These are standard land use colors, so you go from yellow to brown to represent the intensity of residential development. Then we have mixed use, and the mixed use are the pink districts, and then mixed use educational is a dark blue, and that's along South Alexander Street down here. The educational uses are, just so you know, they're the blue areas, and that's where the plan envisions educational uses, including higher education and non-higher educational uses. And then the green may be self-evident, but it's open space and recreation and conservation areas. So this is the general overview of the land use plan. Let me just flip to this is the enlargement of the downtown. We focus in on this so you can get a little bit more clarity. And I think what it's important to point out on this slide is that within these areas, and if you look at the orange in particular, which is the central neighborhood, if you look at the lotting patterns, the lotting patterns are not identical. They're not uniform. There are several different neighborhoods within this area. And the recommendation is that as the zoning is developed for this, which would permit presumably more growth in the form of the missing middle, that each one of these neighborhoods will be looked at specifically for the existing spatial character of the lots. What are the setbacks like in terms of adjacency to other buildings, adjacency to the street? What are the building heights, and what's the best set of characters? You could talk about this almost like a form-based approach to this. This isn't about going in and saying, okay, the density now is 20 units per acre. This is about saying, we are going to allow more growth here, but it's going to happen within the framework of that existing neighborhood. And it may get as high as 20 units per acre. However, we're not going to have a density standard here. It's going to be based on the form that those new developments, or new dwellings, or adapted dwellings, if in the case of subdividing a home, can take. So I think that's an important point to talk about.
And just to reiterate, kind of what you said, if this plan gets approved, November 9th, nothing changes overnight. You know, that's the end of the beginning. And then we have all those conversations, the ordinance changes, you know, analysis, discussion with property owners. There's a little bit of a different concept, I think, than we're used to in Princeton, because our current plan, the land use map, is from 1996, was created on computers from back then. So it's not really that easy to read, and reflected the zoning at the time rather than talked about the land use. So, you know, we don't use that too often, but like Michael said, this paired with those recommendations is the starting point to have those discussions.
Good point. So there are some specific recommendations that I just want to talk about within the land use plan while we look at this slide. We talked about the fact that the standards need to be adjusted, and and the roadblocks need to be taken out. Well, one of the things that happens in some of these areas is that there's a sliding scale for minimum lot sizes of residences, which are unattainable without actually doing wholesale demolition and redevelopment to aggregate single family lots to put a multifamily building there. So we want to look at that so that even if you have an existing lot, what is the appropriate level of development? And we want folks to add units. We don't want you to tear down things to do it. And that's one of the cautions here, is that we are not looking at streamlining the ability for folks to consolidate lots and then create new things. We talked about converting large single family homes into more units. That's definitely part of it. Looking at ADUs, which are permitted in the single family districts, to expand their use as appropriate within other zones, and within in concert with other than single family uses, if appropriate. It's all about the community character.
For the sake of clarification, and most folks have heard this many times, but ADU is accessory dwelling unit. Right, and you can't, well, I just wanted to make sure we don't use too many acronyms that people who don't tune into planning board meetings every week might not know. Thanks.
I'm sorry, that's my fault. I apologize. Accessory dwelling units.
No worries.
And those are currently allowed in some zones, some residential zones behind single family structures. It's an important thing to mention because those have been allowed for 3 years now. So you could argue, you know, we doubled what could be built 3 years ago for our 8,000 or so lots that could, you know, potentially have something. Well, we've had about 20 of them. So when we're talking about these techniques, you know, the first thing is again going through that process to discuss, you know, where and how we use these tools. But then secondly, we don't anticipate any sort of wholesale change. It's really just giving property owners, you know, the opportunity to create those choices for what they want to do with their property. You know, they could rent out a unit. They could then move to that smaller unit when downsizing, so they don't have to, you know, go move out to Pennsylvania or Route 1. They could, you know, allow the family to move into the big unit while they're downsizing or whatever else. But again, those would all be discussed later in depth. And, you know, like Michael said, we're not incentivizing any wholesale changes here.
Yep. One of the recommendations is that the education zones have buffer districts attached to them, that they should be consolidated, and that we should use, rather than zoning, which split lots, we should use buffer standards within those zones. So that's a recommendation here. So the educational districts should be consolidated. The other part is that we do have some schools which are not in educational districts, they're in residential districts, and looking at what the appropriate standards might be if a zone was created around them, so that they don't have to go to the zoning board of adjustment for use variance for minor redevelopment or development. So that's a big recommendation. And they'll have to be looked at individually because they're not uniform. So we can't just apply some education zone standard to that. We also talk about the goal of reducing off-street parking requirements where it can be accommodated to reduce the burden of providing off-street parking on site, rather than so it doesn't erode character of your town, and it promotes more walkability and other modes of transportation other than cars. Also looking at grandfathering provisions for homes or lots that are non-conforming, which otherwise have to go to the Board of Adjustment for variances. What we've heard is that it's a disincentive to come and do maintenance on property and do upgrades to properties because you have to get a use variance just because your lot size is undersized. And there are many undersized lots within Princeton. So this is a way by grandfathering those, provided somebody isn't exacerbating an issue, then you could allow folks to come in and get building permits and be able to maintain and upgrade their homes without having to go in and get a variance, which is a disincentive because it's costly and time consuming. Okay. There are, I will say that another goal is to integrate third places within mixed use and commercial districts. Third places are places where it's not your home, it's not your office or your work, but it's a place where you would go and you would interact with other people, such as a library or a coffee house or one of these things. So we want to see those developed within the mixed use and commercial districts. And without, if I showed you the 30 zoning boundary recommendations that are going to be in this plan that are for the purposes of consolidating, everybody would log off at this moment. But just to say that the harmonization and consolidation will require myriad changes to the zoning boundaries. And when those boundary changes are made, they should also, the zoning regulations also have to be harmonized. And so there has to be decisions about that, and also which standards can be used, and integrate some of the things that we've talked about today. So that's the land use plan. The next thing, the next plan element I'm going to talk about is the economic development plan element. And Justin touched on the fact that this is the first one that you've done. I can say that I don't see lots of towns that do this. There's, at least in my world, they haven't. But the purpose of this element is to formalize strategies to realize a stronger, more resilient local economy. And it includes analysis of local and regional employment data and recommendations to capitalize on Princeton's strengths and reduce constraints on economic growth. Princeton's economy is dominated by the educational services sector, surprisingly, which represent 51% of all jobs. But overall employment trends show a loss of jobs over the past 10 years. And part of the loss reflects the trend of professional firms moving out of Princeton. And employers who were just talked to said, in addition to the barrier of high rents and that their out-of-town employees have for working here is based on a perception of traffic congestion and parking shortages. So that's affected some of the decisions. So not only does that affect the economy, it also is detrimental to Princeton's program and commitment to sustainability because it increases the problem of transportation-related emissions and the cause of climate change. So JGSA looked at sectors in decline or management of companies and enterprises, which is a category that they talk about, dropped from 5.1 to 1.7% of all jobs. Healthcare and social assistance dropped from 15.8 to 6.7 from 2013 to 2020. And that may really reflect the moving of the hospital, I think, in a large way. And then jobs in arts, entertainment, and recreation, very small total, they decline. Growing sectors are retail, professional, scientific, and technical services, and the educational sector. These are largely tied to the presence of the university and are not likely to be relocated elsewhere. So Princeton needs to protect these jobs. One of the key sectors that we identified was life sciences. There was a report done by Newmark, the real estate firm, that identified New Jersey as a huge life sciences market, and that Princeton is a sub-market of that market and has all the features that are a key to success in that market. This is a high concentration of nearby life science, biotechnology, and pharmaceutical firms. Presence of a research university anchor with a strong pipeline of STEM graduate degree holders, and a location within a market experiencing population growth and rising wages. It ranked, the Newmark report in 2021 ranked New Jersey as the 10th strongest regional market in life science real estate. So life science present both a challenge and a unique opportunity. It anticipates significant growth. I know that Somerset County just identified a need for upwards of 400,000 square feet that folks were looking for, companies were looking for. And so the municipality has an opportunity here with life sciences to grow the economy. Talk a little bit about commuter. And this touches on the economy, but it also touches on housing. I'm going to zoom in on this graphic, and out of the 26,800 jobs available in Princeton, only 3,000 or 11.5% were filled by Princeton residents. Okay, 88.5% of workers in Princeton commute from somewhere else, from another municipality, another town. As many as 23,734 people drive to Princeton every day and need somewhere to park. Right. So this graph here, this bubble, shows you that difference. So there's 3,094 people who actually live in Princeton and work in Princeton, and this is based on 2020 information. So you see there's a migration of 8,000 out and 23,700 into Princeton. So this is an issue. Jobs and housing ratio. According to the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the healthy range for the ratio between jobs and housing units is between 0.75 for a bedroom community or 1.5 for an employment center municipality. Well, Princeton's an employment center, so you would say 1.5, but the jobs housing ratio in Princeton is 2.9, which is almost double what EPA would suggest is healthy. And that suggests that people who want to live and work in Princeton may find their housing choices constrained rather than being able to live and work in Princeton. So it talks about that. So let's talk a little bit about the, and you can see there's another graphic that talks about where the jobs are in Princeton. You can see this, the dark purple represents the highest job concentration, with the lightest purple the least. People are commuting. Where are they coming from? It looks like, it takes a second, there you go. It looks like folks are traveling mostly from the southwest to the northeast. Sounds like the Route 1 corridor and the train line. So that's suggests that's where people are coming from.
And again, just to put it in
Interesting.
Oh, sorry, Michael. When we
Go ahead, Justin.
Earlier, we started on mentioning the population of Princeton is 31,000. Looking at that number, 23,000 people are coming in from other towns every day because we don't have the housing to support them. So when we talk about all these things that come up at meetings like traffic and parking, pollution, bigger picture ideas like climate change, if we're able to marry allowing people to live where they work, we could, potentially lessen some of those impacts. Going by the trends that we have now of continuing to essentially shift in a new town every day as workers and then shift them out at 5 o'clock, we will continue to have those same issues and externalities.
So some of the interesting things we learned about commercial districts through the JGSC group was that some of these key findings were annual retail demand per household in Princeton is almost twice the statewide average at 82,388 per household versus 49,000 per household statewide. Nassau Street, Palmer Square is highly attractive to visitors as well as residents, particularly with visitors with high household incomes above 100,000. They are attracted to not just the district, but also the retailers, the high-end national brand retailers in the district. And what we learned was that we even find that folks are, international folks are coming in. So interesting. The largest retail category are eating and drinking establishments, which are 6.1% of all businesses. In contrast to Nassau Street, the shopping center largely serves local needs, and that's another important segment. Not everybody can shop at the fancy places on Nassau Street. You don't need that stuff all the time, but the stuff at Princeton Shopping Center, stuff you need, and additional commercial growth is hoped in that area. Retail demand is expected to grow by $73 million over the next 5 years, a 13% increase. We talked about the retail workers commuting to Princeton. Merchants have difficulty recruiting and retaining workers. Folks on the survey expressed a desire for more housing on Nassau Street in the Central Business District and mid-rise apartments above shops and other things, etc. One of the things that we learned was that within Princeton, there's a high demand for lodging and accommodations, and that's something that we want to make sure that the barriers to any hotel development or lodging are removed, because it is permitted in the Central Business District. But what we learned from Experience Princeton, the SID, Special Improvement District, was that the overnight visitors spend approximately 1.5 times what day tourists spend in Princeton. So that expanding accommodations for overnight visits would help inspire more spending. We talked about the Princeton Shopping Center. There's challenges there with respect to the vacancy rate. They're close to 20% vacancy there, and it was designated as an area in need of redevelopment. Remains to be seen. That's ongoing, how that's going to be resolved there. Alexander Street's one of the main thoroughfares that connects the town to Route 1, and the southwest side is Springdale Golf Course, but the other side are active, some low density convenience retail. The Dinky Station is there, restaurants and office uses, but the proximity to Dinky, the McCarter Theater, and the Lewis Arts Complex creates an opportunity for mixed use development. And we talked about that in the land use plan, more a mixed use educational district, which would be a much more robust expression of what could happen there and capitalizing on those other assets. It's mostly owned by the university, largely. So it will really be something that's a conversation with the university as to the how that zone should be developed. We do have office research uses at Bund Drive. We're hoping to increase the ability for other uses there, including some of the life sciences uses, which require not just the science part of it, but also light manufacturing that's associated with it. What we've learned is that the life sciences, those folks are looking for that small manufacturing space in tandem with that, and that's often the part that's hard to come by. So that may be a way to capitalize on that. And on Bund Drive, where you have larger buildings, you may have the ability to do that with new buildings or redevelopment. Then there's State Road North, the Northern S2 district, where there's an overlay for housing overlay, and so hoping to get more some investment and redevelopment up there. Specific recommendations for economic development are consider establishing an Office of Economic Development within the municipality to act as it would be a different role than the Special Improvement District. It would work with the property owners and try to attract be more focused in attracting things other than the retail development. Another recommendation, foster conversion of office space to research lab, light manufacturing, and associated facilities, as I just discussed in the OR zones. Expand opportunities for new non-residential development through amendments to the ordinance. Let's make sure we don't exclude uses which should be in there, and make sure that the regulations support it. Streamlining requirements, that's a theme. Making sure that folks understand the rules and they can easily navigate and move through the process. Another recommendation is to expand and standardize the design of municipal wayfinding signage in all commercial and mixed-use districts. That finding businesses and being able to find your way around is very important. So that's a key thing that came from JGSC. And foster opportunities for creative placemaking and public art and performance within the public spaces that are within the mixed use and commercial districts. It adds a vibrancy and it attracts folks, and it provides a vitality that can enhance the district. So that was something that was talked about too. Oh, and that's a little graphic showing the different areas: South Alexander Street, Princeton University, downtown, Princeton Shopping Center. I don't think I've ever worked in a town with more historic resources than Princeton. Everywhere I look, there are buildings that just blow me away, and sites. And one of the first projects I worked on at Clarke Caton Hintz, 20-something years ago, was Morven, the restoration of Morven, and the gardens there. So it's very rewarding to see it's still there. But the historic preservation plan element is another plan that we are doing. And the historical importance of Princeton and the exceptional qualities of its architecture and cultural landscapes and et cetera, and view sheds and streetscapes are part of its reputation, right? It's clear, it's everywhere. Historic resources provide valuable connections to the past, and provide a way to recognize previous generations that have built Princeton. The purpose of the historic preservation plan is to establish the overarching goals for historic preservation, identify existing and suggested districts, historic districts, and provide a basis for the development of standards and facilitate the establishment of a consolidated municipality certified local government status. The stewardship of these resources is key to maintaining the quality of life and unique desirable character of Princeton, even as the future comes. So these are the goals. So one of the things I just mentioned was certified local government status. That's our number at the top of the list here. Now, I just want to say, if you're looking at these, the numbers are not a priority list. It was just numbered so we could refer to them. So don't take it as the order of things. But the certified local government status is something you get through the state of New Jersey, and you have to, there's certain requirements for that. And the Historic Preservation Office in Princeton is undertaking those moves already, but we are memorializing them in the master plan. Certified local government status opens up the municipality to grants and other benefits to promote historic preservation. So our goals are to maximize the benefits of certified local government status, amend the historic preservation ordinance to satisfy the requirements for certified local government status, to continue to identify and document historic resources for designation, or just to understand where they are so that you can study them for designation, to maintain a framework for the review and regulation of protected historic resources that is straightforward, transparent, and equitable, and consistent with state guidelines. To facilitate adaptive reuse and restoration of historic buildings where appropriate. We think that, you know, folks who are coming in who have historic properties, if they should be able to restore them, and the zoning shouldn't stand in the way of them wanting to restore things, but according to standards. The balance, historic preservation interest also needs to be balanced with the public interest in creating greater housing choices, sustainability, and economic development. We want to prepare and promote user-friendly information and public awareness for stewardship of resources that are historic, encourage public participation in historic preservation efforts, and ensure resiliency of historic structures. That might mean raising historic structures where they are in a flood zone or an area where flooding is expected to intensify as a result of increased precipitation and runoff. There are 26 existing local historic districts. These are the existing local historic districts. So you can see they're kind of spread out. I'll zoom in a little bit. You see, you know, you've got the Central Historic District, and then Witherspoon Jackson, Prospect Street, and the Battlefield and Morven. And then there are there's some individual small sites here, Drumthwacket's in here. So there are 26 of these individual local historic districts. And the importance of a local historic district is that it actually becomes it's a zoning ordinance, right? It's a zoning district. Actually, you can zone what's going on in there, and it becomes part of your zoning ordinance. So it will be a separate component of the zoning map, but these are local ordinances, and they allow you to regulate historic structures. There are 11 districts on the state and national register, and this is the graphic that shows them. Some of these overlap, you'll notice they're in the same location. We can't map them that way because it's hard to do, so we map them separately. But you can see it's largely the center of town, including much of the town, and dipping into the university properties. It includes the Drumthwacket and the Battlefield. But it also includes, if you follow Nassau Street all the way down, that in its entirety is a National Historic District. So it's interesting. But within the plan, we recommend that there are, we've included 14 potential districts that should be studied because they appear to be the most threatened. And this list that is in the master plan right now doesn't mean that there'll only ever be potentially 14 new historic districts in town. It just says these are the ones that are the most important at this particular time. And it doesn't mean that you won't be studying districts beyond this to determine whether or not they fit the criteria and should be designated as a historic district. So those districts that are recommended are the Mountain Avenue Historic District, the Lake Carnegie Historic District, the Kings Highway Historic District, which is Nassau Street, which I just talked about, Princeton Ice Company, which is now Mountain Lakes Preserve, the Princeton Historic District, which is within the core of town, Morven Tract, Greenholm, which is a residential cul-de-sac that was developed by Colonel William Libby of Thanet Lodge, Princeton University Graduate College, Fitz-Randolph and Broadmead Area Historic District, Institute for Advanced Study, Greenlands, or the Textile Research Institute, Deer Path and Clover Lane, which is a mid-century development, Rosedale Road Historic District, and Battle Road Neighborhood. So this map shows the locations and the differences between these districts. It identifies those that are suggested. There's 4 that are, or 5 that are already on the state and national registry, and then there are 9 which are suggested local districts which are not on the state and national registry. So we've differentiated them in those ways. in addition to the recommendations for studying districts, the plan will recommend how the administration of historic preservation review should go, and it should be working with folks to make sure there's plenty of information out there to complement the stewardship, and so folks understand the process, they understand the design standards. If you're reviewing historic properties or there's a historic review, you need standards for that. So we recommend the development of that. The promotion of online resources to inform folks, and to develop a comprehensive system of wayfinding that ties into the historic sites and buildings. And that may dovetail with the municipal wayfinding within the downtown. We talk about the removal of historic buffer districts. Right now you have historic buffer districts in town. The suggestion is that, as with the educational zones that have buffer districts, to regulate the existing zones with buffer requirements within those zones rather than having a district that discusses that.
And just a note on that, so we, as Michael said, we've been working on getting our certified local government status back. We lost that through consolidation. Both the borough and the township had the certified local government status, and staff has been working to get that back by speaking with the State Historic Preservation Office about our current ordinance. So we've reflected the most recent round of discussions with the State Historic Preservation Office about the ordinance, and that's where something like that buffer district recommendation comes from. But also, just, you know, this is kind of timely. Just 2 days ago, or maybe it was even yesterday, who knows what day it is anymore. A grant opportunity came across my desk for historic preservation grants from the state, but you had to have a certified local government status. So these were grants for $15,000 to $50,000, with the goals being, quote, to identify buildings, sites, structures, objects, and districts which are significant in the areas of history, architecture, archaeology, and engineering, and which meet criteria for inclusion in the New Jersey and National Registers of Historic Places, and to design and implement planning tools for the protection of historic resources. So you could kind of see from there how, you know, if we update that ordinance, if we get that certified local government status back, we could then apply for these grants that would help accomplish some of those other goals to really enhance and educate people on all the historic resources that we have throughout town. You know, even the ones that homeowners live in, there could potentially be grants for the upkeep of their house or other things like that. Concurrently, you know, really what this plan is calling for is, like Michael said, to create and adopt design guidelines for our 21 currently existing historic districts. And really that, you know, that's more fair to the commission that reviews it, to staff that reviews it, as well as the property owner, and is a more straightforward review. And again, having that expertise to really, you know, get the resources to get that expertise for each district and the guidelines. And, you know, again, just increasing that public interest in historic preservation through education and things like interpretive signage, and just really showing off the resources we have. You could imagine, you know, we have a lot of events coming up regarding and I probably can't say it, but the anniversary of 1776 sesquicentennial.
Semi first.
I knew I was missing something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have for that we have the battlefield itself. We have Nassau Hall where battles took place, the Washington Rochambeau Trail. But someone might not know, as they're going from the battlefield up to Nassau Hall, that they're walking through Frog Hollow and the Mercer Hill district and see the barracks. We also have, you know, obviously more interest in Oppenheimer now, and the Institute for Advanced Study. So, you know, people might be coming in to see where Robert Downey Jr. or Matt Damon or Cillian Murphy filmed scenes. Maybe they should know about the actual people as well. And I heard in the mayor's podcast, the Institute is interested in things like that, as well as obviously all the folks that we see by Einstein, and we all know how he didn't want his house to become a tourist destination. But again, maybe expanding on how he went to Witherspoon Jackson district and his friendship with Paul Robeson and other things like that that we could really show off with these resources.
All right.
Thanks for that.
And one more recommendation, there's a list of, there was an architectural survey completed many years ago. And one of the recommendations is to update that survey as necessary to ensure that historic resources that were on the survey or on that list still remain, and also to identify any new properties that should be added to the list. Ongoing stewardship. So the next element is the mobility plan element, and in the land use law, they call it a circulation plan element, but that doesn't really capture everything. So we call it a mobility element. The purpose is to establish the overarching goals related to transportation infrastructure and mobility, and to integrate prior transportation-related plans and studies relevant to achieving the goals. This plan element will inform capital improvements, development, and standards and decisions of municipal agencies. That's really what it's for, and it complements land use and economic development. And you'll see that as this plan surfaces in total, as a general aside, there's linkages between all of these elements and each other for the most part. You'll see these threads that go back and forth between mobility and land use and economic development and economic development and mobility. So it all works together for the most part. So the first thing that we want to talk about is a hierarchy. And this is a graphic that folks may have seen before. I'm sure you have. The mobility pyramid. And what this is demonstrating is that this is the established priority for mobility in Princeton. It's going to prioritize walking and personal mobility over motorized and personal car, which is the least favorite. So at the top of the pyramid, the inverted pyramid, is personal mobility, then biking and micro mobility below that, then transit, then car sharing, carpool, and then personal car, single occupancy vehicles. So this now is embedded in your mobility plan as policy, provided you adopt it. It's not a policy yet. And from a street network standpoint, Princeton has recognized that you need to effectively utilize and plan for your street network. And it has a strategic balance of priorities. So one of the things the land use law requires you to do is to talk about streets and thoroughfares with relation to the Federal Highway Administration functional street and road classifications, which, if you're not familiar, if anybody ever said to you, that's an arterial road, or that's a major collector road, and therefore X or this or Y, that's their system. And that system is based primarily on the volume of traffic it is taking. Not volume of people, not people walking, not people biking. It's just about vehicles. And it's a very simplistic, and in our world today, wrong-headed way to look at thoroughfare design within communities, desirable communities. So in Princeton's case, we're going to move beyond those. And while we can acknowledge that they exist, Princeton is moving away from the Federal Highway Administration classification system and to adapt complete and green street typologies that are based largely on the National Association of City Transportation Officials, or NACTO. And NACTO advocates for a much more comprehensive approach to roadway classification, which classifies roads and thoroughfare. I don't say roads because I think that's the pavement, but thoroughfares, right? Because it has all kinds of different things in it. How individual streets relate to the community, not just how they relate to motor vehicles. And on this screen, we've got a couple of these examples. We've got a residential shared street, neighborhood main street, and a neighborhood street. And it shows you how these things illustrate. These are very good illustrations, and NACTO said we could use these in your plan that demonstrate different approaches, and they show a degree of hierarchy here as to how much traffic and how much activity and what the adjacent uses are. And that's really what NACTO does. The Princeton, working with Princeton engineering and with Justin, they've suggested hybrid typologies that combine the Federal Highway Administration classifications with NACTO street typologies. And these are not in the master plan saying this is what will be built. This is how we will do this. This is saying these are aspirational ways to address different types of streets. But ultimately, as capital plans are developed or capital projects are developed, the application of these will reflect the individual existing conditions, land uses, and other demands on individual streets. So don't take these as this is the answer. This is the start of the answer once you start looking at street design. So what the engineering department has suggested is that, you know, Nassau Street should be a downtown Main Street typology. Commercial shared streets would include Witherspoon Street south of Wiggins. Suburban thoroughfares, which sounds really fast to me. I don't like the sound of that, but that's a NACTO typology. To step down from a downtown thoroughfare, which is a major street that connects to a neighborhood center or runs to the downtown. So they've suggested several streets in that typology. And then rural thoroughfares, they've talked about those, which are suburban-like, but they're more rural and low density, which really reflects the roadways that are out in the Greenway, Greenbelt area, Greenway neighborhood, and then neighborhood streets. And then there's local streets and stuff. So this represents a real departure. The previous circulation plan element had very strict dimensional standards based on the highway classification system of the Federal Highway Administration. This is really moving, including something of that, but really moving to this other world where you're looking at streets very holistically, from all modes of mobility to the land uses that are on there and the character of these streets. So we think it's a really positive way to begin to look at your thoroughfares. Additionally, the plan recommends that streets be looked at from a complete streets perspective, which means it accommodates mobility for as many and safe mobility for as many users as possible from ages and abilities, and green streets, that these streets would be complete and green, meaning that they would integrate green technologies. And we talked about green technologies, it means vegetation, shading, infiltration of stormwater, and recharge of stormwater to the greatest degree possible. So you can have complete green streets that also act as a sponge and have the attributes of a park in some cases. So that's the aspirational language there. Just talk a little bit about sidewalks. So here's the 2017 sidewalk plan. We've carried that through from the circulation element. And so the recommendation is to continue to implement the sidewalk plan to the greatest extent it can be, expand it as necessary as development occurs in the future. And that's right now, Princeton has more than 80 miles of sidewalk, and but there's still places where it needs sidewalk. So implementation should continue with this. With respect to bicycle mobility, this is the bicycle mobility network from the 2017 bicycle mobility plan. Right now, the bike network consists of about 24.5 miles of off-street paths and 10.8 miles of on-street paths. So this is carried forth from 2017, and the implementation of this should reflect changing conditions as we look at NACTO streets, but also as the conditions change as development proceeds within the municipality. One thing to talk about is Vision Zero, and that's down here. So Vision Zero is the strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing safe and healthy and equitable mobility for everybody. The principles of Vision Zero include protection of all users of the street, whether walking, rolling, riding a bike, riding a bus, or driving a car or truck. That safety takes priority over speed and volume, as well as financial costs, both in design decisions and maintenance operations. Protection of the most vulnerable road users in a street design is the basis for design and funding decisions. Focused design on communities of concern, including people with limited private access to vehicle or limited access to private vehicles, youth, seniors, people with disabilities, and those dependent on public transit. Focus on design and engineering as the main means to ensure safe behaviors, not on street signs and speed limit signs. This is physical design, and you can see in these NACDO examples up here, you can, if you look at the yellow area, the yellow areas are highlighting in the shared street. It shows where cars and people both go. In the neighborhood street, it's showing the curb extensions and the crosswalk, which are enhanced. That's the physical things that they're talking about. You don't and slowing people down. So traffic calming comes into that as well. So those are some of the aspects of Vision Zero, and that approach is recommended in the plan. There's some transit services in Princeton. There's the Dinky, which is the casual name, but the NJ Transit Princeton branch, New Jersey Transit bus routes, Tiger Transit, which is run by the university, the Muni bus, Coach USA bus, which is a private bus that goes along Route 27, Crosstown Ride Provide, which are for seniors and for folks with disabilities, New Jersey Transit Access Link, which is also for disabilities, and then the public schools. So the plan calls for most robustly, most clearly, is coordination of the mobility network, the transit mobility network. This is the larger scale, which you can't really distinguish the different lines here, but it shows how they bus routes come in from. Oops, sorry about that. They come in. They start up, coming in on 206, and they come down from Montgomery, and then they head out down 27, and then they go out to Route 1. So that's the larger area of how the buses go. But if you zoom in, you can get a little better picture of this. The Muni bus, which is the red line, really forms a loop around downtown and then out Nassau Street. New Jersey Transit bus routes are the blue, and they come in and they get into downtown, and then they head out on the county roads and Route 206. The Coach USA, that's pretty simple. That just rolls up 27. And then Tiger Transit, which is the pink line, which actually comes into Merrick-Stanworth and grabs folks there. Then it goes along Nassau Street, and then it has its own routes within the university lands, and then extends out to Route 1. So the general theme here is that that there's a need to coordinate all of these, and to hopefully through that coordination fill any gaps and be able to fundamentally adapt the transit, the local transit, to carry the most riders and get people out of cars and facilitate mobility through and around Princeton. There are one of the other recommendations in the plan really gets at something that's happened, and it's been exacerbated, I think, through COVID and other things, and that is managing the curbs within your downtown and within your commercial districts. What's happened is, with the delivery culture of not just packages, with the packages, online retailers, but also with the food deliveries and also ride sharing, is that you can have jams and double parking in your commercial districts, and that becomes a problem. And so, and this also becomes a problem for businesses. So this ties back into economic development, where if you have folks who can't see a business because there's a truck parked there, then that's a problem, or can't see a sign. So managing the curbs and the access to the sidewalk and the curbs within the downtown and within the commercial district is recommended here. And some of the recommendations may be to work on a delivery management system with specific locations put aside to avoid this double parking, but to work with businesses and other landowners to develop a system of that. So I think that's important. From a parking standpoint and mobility, this plan really seeks to limit, not limit, but to reduce the burden of providing off-street parking on some of the land uses, because the on-street parking tends to be corrosive to the urban fabric and the community fabric. And so, but there's a perception at times that there's not adequate parking in Princeton. There have been studies done, and there are parking structures proximate to the downtown, which are usually not full. And so there's a recommendation to prepare a parking management plan and amend the zoning code to incentivize shared parking facilities and to optimize the parking that is there. There's a consideration of a pilot in lieu of parking policy, and to prioritize siting of electrical vehicle charging stations that are within key parking areas. Promote that. The other thing that we discuss in the plan is that the residential site improvement standards dictate the number of parking spaces that are required at the state. It's a state requirement, and the residential site improvement standards were developed in order to create a uniform set of site standards to save developers money, so they didn't have different requirements in each location. Right now, Princeton is, that's what you're required to do. You can grant exceptions from that, and that's okay. But it may be worthwhile considering a special area exemption from the residential site improvement standards in order to create lower standards or eliminate standards in some cases, in order to stop the corrosion of the fabric that's due to putting off-street parking on within your town, but also to promote a little bit more growth within and incentives for growth within key places like the downtown, which everybody wants in terms of the public. So I've heard other folks opine that if you have a redevelopment area, you're exempt from the residential site improvement standards. That's not true, based on the legal guidance I've been given. So that doesn't necessarily give you the ability to do that. That's a move that we think is a recommendation we think is important. And we also think part and parcel of the wayfinding in the downtown and around the commercial districts with to find businesses is also wayfinding to find park. I don't have any trouble finding parking in Princeton, but making that more pronounced, it dovetails with the economic development.
And before we move on, if I could just go back to the Vision Zero, and you don't have to scroll back up.
Okay.
This plan not only recommends the ideas and the basis of Vision Zero, but having an actual Vision Zero plan. We've seen success in places near and far, particularly Jersey City and Hoboken, with having a major master plan rewrite or a significant update, and then following up with a Vision Zero action plan where they could really drill down onto things as narrow as specific intersections or things as broad as lobbying the state with other towns for certain things. So that's something that this plan certainly encourages, and I expect that'll be one of the priorities coming out of it. And just generally, just to reiterate or summarize some of the things that Michael said, we're looking to establish a logic in the system with the transit we have, as well as the new transit that we've seen even since the 2017 update of this plan. Whether it's the Grubhub drivers that do K-turns on Witherspoon Street, or those vans from Seattle that just park wherever they want, whether it's bike share or other modes as well, and really not making it a place where it's just we're encouraging cars and then wondering why there's traffic at certain times of the day, but there's more out there, especially with that pyramid that Michael showed and that we've kind of inverted. That's all.
Cool. Next element I'm going to talk about is the conservation, open space, and recreation plan element. This element represents a combination of the open space and conservation plan with a recreation plan element. And it's intended to, the reason it's combined is it was done that way in discussions with Princeton when we first started this project, because they're very interrelated with respect to recreation and open space, natural conservation. So we've combined these, and it also provides a framework that is suitable for Green Acres to review as your open space plan, should you seek funding for acquisition or improvement of open space. So that's why this is here. And in a nutshell, it talks about the natural resources of within Princeton that we can identify. So it talks about open space. And when we talk about open space, we're talking about land that is preserved, not just the vacant lot next to somebody who you think you would like to have as open space forever. It's only which is preserved. And then we talk a little bit about recreation and the goals for recreation and what's going on with recreation. So that's the purpose of this. So the goals, I'll quickly go through the goals. Coordinate preservation development to accommodate growth while preserving and enhancing natural resources. Guide growth away from natural resources and towards areas with existing infrastructure. Limit disturbance of environmentally sensitive lands. Protect water quality. Remove and replace non-native plantings. Oh, never ending. Manage nuisance and invasive species. There you go. That's never ending. Preserve contiguous natural lands to minimize habitat fragmentation and maximize the benefits. That's important. Animals don't just, stop at some point, so habitat fragmentation really limits where animals can be. You want to have contiguous lands so that they can move about freely and be healthy. Preserve and enhance existing visual resources, scenic corridors, tree-lined streets, historic landscapes, etc. Retrofit urban areas to accommodate. When we say urban areas, that sounds like, where is that? Is that in Princeton? No, we're talking about developed areas, like around the shopping center or downtown or Alexander Street or any of those places. But what we're saying is, if you have these places which traditionally have been very heavily paved, find ways to depave them and to integrate vegetation and also effectively recharge stormwater if you can. So green urbanized areas, I think is more apt to say, and foster stewardship and management of those lands that have been preserved. From an open space and recreation, it's a goal to meet active and passive recreational needs, to develop criteria to guide the selective and strategic preservation of lands. So not just preserving land to preserve land, but preserving it with a purpose. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Develop a system of trails and open space linkages. That trails, that's all we heard at the first survey and open house. So that is where mobility and open space and recreation come together. So we're going to talk about that too. Enhance accessibility of open space and recreational facilities. Universal access, that's important. Equitable and universal access. Provide low emission access to open space and recreational facilities. That means you don't drive a car and you don't have a gas powered machine taking you there. Find ways to get people there without having to turn a motor on. integrate open space and recreational facilities as feasible into private development, promote stewardship of the parks, and reduce the threats to natural landscapes from pests, disease, and non-native invasive species. That's 3 times we've talked about non-native invasives. And it's a growing and persistent problem in woods everywhere.
Before
So-
Michael goes, before
Go
you go
ahead.
into more detail, you may have heard that our first ever open space manager left our infrastructure department for a job with the county planning department, which is very unfortunate. But luckily, before she left, she was able to not only give us her professional expertise, but also funnel all this information she had from all the environmental groups around town and in the area, including things like Michael will get into it, but this orange line is the emerald necklace, if you will, that someone and his daughter walked it and tracked it that way. So she had all this mapping data that either she did or she gathered from others. And before she left, luckily we were able to get all that and use that when making these recommendations and making some of, there's a variety of maps in the plan itself. Additionally, this section will be up to the standards for Green Acres funding too. So we made sure to do that.
Thanks for stealing my thunder, but that's, I do appreciate you bringing up Cindy's contribution to this. We met with a lot of staff folks, and she's very smart, really smart, knew everything about this, and it was a real pleasure to work with her while she was here. So I'm going to jump ahead to the Trails and Greenway Network because that's the biggest image on the slide. So you heard Justin talk about the Emerald Necklace. We call it a Princeton Greenway and Trail Network. If at some point and the reason we call it that is because the Emerald Necklace was taken years and years ago by somebody, but we understand that that's how this has been known colloquially for a while. So Emerald Necklace. In this image, in this map, I guess it's a map, diagram, what you're seeing on here, first and foremost, we've mapped open space and recreational lands, and that's the greens of various shades, and I'll zoom in so you can see there's green, there's dark green, and then there are yellow, which are private open spaces, and a lot of those, if you look at the yellow, you can see those are really the leftovers or the byproducts of cluster development in some cases. And they're interstitial with homes and developments. And then on here, we've got the dark green dashed lines, which are existing trails. And finally, we've show in, I guess it's a pink or purple line, those are utility rights of way, which have the capacity or the ability to be used as a trail segment if necessary to create better connectivity. So this alignment, and so now I'll get to the big picture. The orange, ironically, it's orange, it's not green, because we had to use a different color over the green open space. That represents what Justin was just talking about as the routing for this, and it really followed the existing open space. I'm sorry about my hand. The existing open space and those areas where they thought that, or there was a perception that you can make connections either through existing trails or existing open space or land that is not necessarily public open space, but maybe there could be an easement or something like that. So that orange cloudy line represents that alignment of the potential for a greenway, where the idea and the concept is that you might be able to walk this entire greenway or bike this entire greenway with minimal street crossings. Obviously, you'd have to cross streets here and there, but they could be enhanced crossings and things like that. So it's a great visual tool to identify what this concept is. And going further, I mentioned before, strategic acquisition of open space, not just open space for open space. You don't have infinite money. You don't have infinite goodwill of folks who say, hey, I want to give you an easement for my open space. Doesn't happen every day. So what this can be used for is that, and the reason it's shown as a fuzzy line is because you may not have control over which properties you can actually get to. But if you have properties that are proximate to or within this line, you can show this to like a green acres, if you will, and say, listen, we're going to acquire this property and it's part of our greenway plan. That's the purpose of this. It doesn't just show where you aspirationally want a greenway. It actually has functional and a practical aspect in demonstrating to green acres where you're prioritizing open space acquisition for the purposes of the greenway. And so that's why this is important. And that's the greenway. And not just, so this is the Princeton Greenway, if you will, but there are several other trails and greenways that are nearby. There's the East Coast Greenway, which is a developing trail system, which goes nearly 3,000 miles from Maine to Florida. And it's being cobbled together within states and counties and over multiple states. Once finished, it'll provide a continuous, safe and scenic route for bicycle and pedestrian travel. It connects, think about over 3,000 miles. In Princeton, the route follows the DNR Canal, Delaware and Raritan Canal Trail, in addition to an alternative on-road route at Mercer Road and Nassau Street. So this greenway would connect to that. There's nearby the Lawrence Hopewell Trail, which is a 22-mile loop. It's very cool. It's in Hopewell and Lawrence Township, off on-road bike routes and off-road multi-use paths. And it includes a portion of Princeton's western border at Province Line Road. And it's accessible via that way or by the towpath to Maidenhead Meadows Park in Lawrence Township. We just talked about the Delaware and Raritan Canal State Park Trail. That once you get there, you get connections all over the place. And then the Circuit Trails, which is an 800-mile network of expanding trails for bicycle and pedestrians that connects communities, employment centers, parks, and open space in the greater Philadelphia area. That circuit includes both the DNR Canal Trail and the Lawrence Hopewell Trail. So there's opportunities to strengthen connections even, to Philadelphia and those areas. So that's the trail discussion, right? And it's really your open space strategy, your open space acquisition strategy. Forests are dwindling and are endangered by pests and things like that, and climate change, which is changing the local culture in terms of humidity and heat for trees. So protecting forests is a major theme of this plan. But when we talk about trees, we're not just talking about the existing forests, we're talking about urbanized areas. And this tree equity score is it's a tool that you can use, and it's by the American Forest to see how effectively trees and their associated benefits are distributed across communities. And what this shows is that what's mapped, you can see that Princeton has a pretty good tree equity from 100% to 89%. And while some of this is not mapped by them, we're relying on their data. The area of the least amount of trees is around the downtown, where you have the most urbanized conditions. So it's not a surprise, but it still has an 89 score there, which is pretty darn good for an urbanized area. But from a tree equity standpoint, the plan recommends that as with the greening of this area, as redevelopment and development occurs within the downtown and the associated neighborhoods, that getting shade trees in there, whether it's a street tree or whether it's part of a site, that this is a place where you want to focus your efforts. So as you're developing and redeveloping, greening is the way to go. Princeton's wildlife habitat, I don't have habitat maps up here, but I will tell you, the wildlife habitat, critical wildlife habitat, largely reflects the lowest density areas of the town, the R1 and the RA zones that are on the ridge, and where you have the most forest areas, and the streams and the stream corridors that are within those areas. And so protecting that habitat is already built into the land use plan. But development and ongoing development and zoning has to be conscious of that. And the recommendation to maintain contiguous habitat is important. So if development applications come in and they appear to fragment something, you need to look at those linkages. Trails and greenways. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about recreational facilities. Princeton Recreation Department maintains active recreational facilities and programs at 15 park locations at almost 270 acres of municipal parkland. The recreation facilities support more than 18 organized sports leagues and recreation programs, and the Recreation Department estimates that residents comprise more than 50% of the participants in its programs. And we discussed with them the programming needs that they have. And what they told us was that since 2008, since the 2008 Parks Recreation Master Plan was adopted, the need has grown significantly. The increase in demand is related in part toward changing landscape of youth sports and partly to COVID-19 changing people's habits. Youth sports, in that case, are increasingly utilizing fields for training and practices in addition to games. And so they're competing for time. Results in larger fields being divided up to accommodate several teams or sports simultaneously, which means they may not have an official field when needed. The duration of field use is also expanding with greater use on weekends and during evenings, and to the degree that daylight is sufficient. And the continuous use of, what they tell us is the continuous use of these fields, it's tough to maintain natural turf fields. You get compaction, then the grass can't grow or it can't regrow, and they don't get the time to rest it, and you need to irrigate and pour chemicals on it, over application of chemicals. They're telling us. Princeton shares recreational facilities to some degree, with Princeton Public Schools, the university, and the Hunt School, but those arrangements are helpful, but they don't solve all the needs that they have. And that there are also, in addition to program by the municipality, there are independent organizations that utilize the municipal and educational fields to a great degree. So in terms of recommendations, I think we've hit almost everything. Oh, from an open space standpoint, one of the things that we're recommending is establish an open space advisory committee to work with and develop the open space and recreation standards for evaluating development applications, and to develop criteria to assist the planning board and council review of opportunities to acquire land for open space and recreation through development applications. There's an open space and recreation inventory, which is sometimes called a ROSI, R-O-S-I. Some people call it ROSI. That is a very important list. And that's really the list of all your open space properties that Green Acres looks at and as encumbered by Green Acres easements, whether or not they were actually acquired using Green Acres money. So it's important that you keep that up to date, and it should be maintained and ensure that it's consistent with what Green Acres understands your recreation open space inventory to be, because if there's a misunderstanding, it can be very problematic. In terms of open space, there's open space that's acquired in fee simple or through an easement. There's open space that is provided by donation, but through development applications, you can also get open space. And you have cluster provisions within the RA zone and I think the R1 zone that allow for smaller lot sizes in exchange for setting aside open space. The regulations that are required for a developer to go through in order to demonstrate that they can actually develop the property are extensive. In other communities we've worked in, we've made clustering mandatory in order to acquire it, and the Supreme Court, or the Superior Court agreed with that mandatory clustering is legal. I'm not suggesting that you need to go to mandatory clustering, but the provisions for clustering are so cumbersome. By the time somebody's come in and shown you they're conforming non-cluster development, they've already spent as much as they would to develop a cluster subdivision. So consideration to amending the zoning code provisions to allow for a more streamlined process to consider clustering could result in more open space, and that's recommended in here. And it's from a standpoint of access and equity, there's a need to maintain and ensure that equity and access is considered in all new open space acquisitions, and not necessarily in the acquisitions themselves, but any improvements that are made to them, and that universal design is incorporated in recreational facilities. There's also a need to look at proximity. When we talk about access, it's not just about accessibility, it's about how close is it to you. And so looking for those opportunities to make sure that those places that might not have a park nearby may find a way to get some recreational facilities there. And finally, there's recommendations about maintenance and stewardship of open space and ensuring that there are resources to do so. It's one thing to get open space, it's another thing to maintain it, and to be a good steward. Particularly, and that really needs to be based on the nature of the open space, whether it's a meadow to be maintained or whether it's a forest to be maintained. The battle against invasive species is ongoing and has the clearest path to be problematic for your open spaces, but also just general maintenance and making sure that things are taken care of and that folks know that somebody's watching and that you need to maintain the parks and open space to the greatest extent you can. Be good stewards is really the whole thing.
You may recall that we have an environmental resource inventory. Ours was last updated in 2010, and a process had began to update that again. We discussed using the data in this plan from that, but then we didn't think that inventory would be done until after the plan. So we were able to do the first part. You know, like I said, we took the data that the open space manager created. That process for the inventory has stalled. There was a consultant and then they were dropped and whatever. But for our purposes, we have the data we need for this plan. For the purposes of the inventory, we recommend, picking up once that new open space manager comes on board.
That's right. So the next element.
Excuse me, Michael. I'm gonna suggest that we give you an opportunity to rest and for 10 minutes, but take a break.
Oh, good.
Not just you, but all of us. Not just you.
That gives me a chance to get some more bourbon. I mean, no.
You mean hot tea for your voice.
Right.
Yeah. So it's 9:15. We'll reconvene at 9:25 on the dot or close to it. And thanks. See you then.
Okay.
Thank you, Carrie. Go ahead, Michael.
All right. The next element I'm going to talk about is the community facilities plan element. The purpose of this element is to identify existing community facilities and establish goals and objectives related to the provision of community facilities and programs, and to inform the municipality's capital improvements, development and redevelopment standards, and general municipal decision-making. The goals and objectives, or the goals here, are provide high-quality municipal educational cultural facilities to meet the needs, promote and enhance the built environment, reinforce Princeton's unique sense of place, implement sustainable and green building practices at all municipal community facilities, integrate renewable energy generation and utilization into municipal and school facilities to the greatest extent possible, integrate green technology and sustainable design into municipal and school facilities, establish redundant energy systems where allowable, to to maintain operations during public emergencies, develop emergency management plans, provide outstanding public school facilities and plan for future school capacity, and strategically locate newer expanded school facilities to maximize access and walkability. So we've this plan element really, it does inventory each of the municipal facilities, including public safety, with police department, fire department, the First Aid and Rescue Squad, which is an independent nonprofit that serves the municipality, and the Department of Emergency and Safety Services. It identifies the location of the Recreation Department and Public Works facilities. It discusses public health and Penn Medicine, Princeton Health, the hospital which left and is now out on Route 1. But Princeton Health has some facilities within Princeton. It mentions those and what it does. And the Princeton Health Department, who we talked with in developing the community facilities element. It also talks about public facilities that are not necessarily municipal facilities, such as the public library, which is a great facility, 57,600 square foot facility, right on Heinz Plaza on Witherspoon Street, the Princeton Senior Resource Center, and others. Talks about the YMCA, the YWCA, 59 Paul Robeson Place. And it also talks about cultural amenities, including the Arts Council, Heinz Plaza, Lewis Arts Complex, McCarter Theater, Princeton Art Museum, and the Garden Theater, and Princeton University's Richardson Auditorium, Taplin Auditorium, and other facilities. It also talks about educational facilities. Education is a special characteristic. High quality education is a special characteristic of Princeton, and we found this throughout our work here. The recognition of both, the most famous Princeton University, but also with the public and private schools that serve elementary and secondary education. So it's really part of the backbone of the community in terms of its high quality, and it's part of what makes housing in Princeton in very high demand. So this plan element describes the public and charter schools, and it identifies that in most particularly for the public schools is developing a new facilities plan, and that's in progress, and we're expecting that to be a plan to accommodate projected enrollment growth by mid-October to November of this year, and to select a plan for the next phase of renovation and construction to accommodate forecasted enrollment. We don't have the projections from them, but we assume it's going to be whatever the projections are, that it's well reasoned and thought out. And the only aspect of that this really talks about in the community facilities plan is that, and then the last point I made on the goals is strategically locate newer expanded school facilities to maximize access and walkability. And so that means a place where you have the highest number of homes, you have the most robust sidewalk network, and where the school facilities will be closest to the highest number of homes to maximize folks walking to school. We also detail the non-public schools, several private and parochial schools that are, and I'm not going to name any of them because I don't want to leave anybody out, but we name them. And then we have Princeton University in terms of higher learning, the Princeton Theological Seminary, and the Institute for Advanced Study. Westminster Choir College, which is now owned by Ryder, moved its operations out in 2020. And so most of the recommendations in here really relate to maintaining and enhancing the services. But what a little more detail that I want to talk about is the implementation of redundant energy systems for critical facilities. Some of these municipal facilities are critical facilities in times of emergencies. And when we talk about critical facilities, these are facilities that are designated and deemed to be necessary to maintain function during an emergency, during a public emergency. So this calls for hardening of the systems in terms of resiliency, and also redundancy in terms of power, whether that's a microgrid or distributed energy resources at a site level or at a neighborhood level. So that's a big recommendation here. There's also a recommendation, and this dovetails with some of the conservation goals for air quality, and that is to install resilient electric vehicle charging infrastructure that can serve municipal vehicles, and also electrifying the vehicle fleet at some point. So those are the resiliency and the energy recommendations here are really relevant to the community facilities. This plan doesn't really call for new facilities. It calls for enhancing facilities, and as they are enhanced, to follow these principles. And that's basically the community facilities plan. The next plan element is the utility plan element, and this is an interesting one because it used to be that the utility plan was its own thing, but the statute, the municipal land use law, requires that a utility plan now include the municipal stormwater management master plan or stormwater management plan, which is in a separate section of the land use or the municipal land use law, but it is housed under the utility. And that's, I can see the logic of that more and more as I work with towns on this. So the utility plan element has some fairly reasonable goals here, and that is to provide high quality utility services, upgrade broadband and cellular service to meet the standards for Princeton. And that's something that business owners really want. They want upgrades in that because it'll make their businesses work better. Ensure equitable access to utility services, accommodate future growth with utilities, increase capacity and harden infrastructure in areas where future growth will occur. That may mean burying electrical lines, or it may also mean, as with community facilities, redundant energy systems for the cases of like a microgrid or something like that. Improve efficiency of all development projects and public systems related to utility use. So that gets to how buildings are built, and shading of sites, and how sites and buildings are designed. Maximize redundancy in utility services. We talked about redundant energy. Minimize waste, including solid waste and byproducts of utility service and municipal operations. Promote renewable energy, including solar, wind, and geothermal systems. Currently, solar is permitted in Princeton, but there are not real standards governing it. And we recommend that there should be standards for solar, integration of solar or photovoltaic energy generation. Wind should be considered. Wind was sort of a dirty word in anything but an industrial area, and Princeton currently does not permit wind energy systems, but we're seeing smaller, more, small scale based wind. And so I'm starting tape. I'm sorry. So we're seeing smaller scale wind generation that's almost like home scale versions of it. So we're exploring that. So there may be a point in the future it should be considered, but right now it's only required to be permitted in industrial districts, and you don't have any of those. And then geothermal, which is heat from the earth. Eliminate contributions to climate change through management of greenhouse gas emissions and activities that accelerate it. So that's important with fuels and vehicles and et cetera. Maximize climate resiliency through utility infrastructure improvements that maintain service through climate change related hazards. That's important. That's hardening of the utility infrastructure so that it can resist flooding, so that it can resist wind and other things that we don't even know climate change is going to do yet. So continue to maintain and improve city utilities, or not city utility systems. Support New Jersey's community solar program to bring lower energy costs to eligible households. That's a program whereby lower households with lower moderate incomes can buy power at a lower cost through this program, where somebody builds a solar photovoltaic solar energy system, and they are required by the BPU to enlist households that are eligible, which have lower incomes. So that's something that we're recommending the municipality support. And then reduce stormwater runoff and flood risk. Make the built environment greener and more absorbent. Obviously, this is a huge recommendation, and the ways to do that are myriad. And they start with capital project planning, and they start with ordinances and regulations. And Princeton and its stormwater management ordinance is stronger than the state. So that needs to continue, and those regulations need to continue to be enforced, and folks need to be educated that those ordinances exist and how to address them. So what we see on this page is, the first thing is the sewer service area. So Princeton's wastewater, Princeton has water through the New Jersey American Water Company, and there's really no issue right now with the provisions. And some water is provided by private wells. We don't anticipate any supply problems this time, but it will have to be monitored to ensure that the systems that provide water are maintained and are hardened over time to ensure that that water can continue to be supplied. From a wastewater perspective, this is the sewer service area, this pink area. That's the public sewer service area. And you can see it carves out mostly open space and low density residential areas from the wastewater management areas, sewer service area. There's no recommendations in here to change the sewer service area at this time based on the land use plan. Princeton owns and maintains its own sewer collection system. There's an ongoing program to reduce inflow and infiltration. Inflow and infiltration is when wastewater systems are breached by either stormwater that is leaking into the system, or groundwater that's leaking into the system, or some other way where illicit connections are creating more capacity issues. And what it does is it takes up capacity of the system and reduces the ability to serve. So that's ongoing with the program, and it's recommended to continue to keep going. Princeton generates about 3.45 million gallons per day of sewage. It's treated at the River Road plant, which is operated by Stony Brook Regional Storage Authority. It also serves South Brunswick and West Windsor. It has a rated capacity of 13 million gallons per day, and the authority is exploring the potential to expand to 20 million gallons per day. It's provided on a first come, first served basis. So the capacity of the system will need to be continually reviewed as development proceeds within Princeton, not just private development, but all development, and to monitor that so that the wastewater needs for future development can be met. And if it ever gets to the point where there is, it appears that the capacity is starting to shrink, then actions may need to be taken to expand the plant to the rated capacity of 20 million gallons per day, or some other solution. But we don't anticipate any immediate issues with respect to wastewater in Princeton.
And our current utility element is from 2005, and it mentions under emerging technologies things like cable TV access, satellite dishes, public access to computers. And I don't say that to harp on our current element. If I wanted to do that, I would say I could vote in next month's election. But really to say, we're modernizing, we're bringing in sections like the ones that Michael mentioned, or topics like composting, obviously the broadband and cell service issues that we have throughout town, and solar panels too. So again, this is part of the reason we're doing this now and doing it the way we are is some of these elements are due for updating.
And saying that, it's doing these elements all together has really allowed us to make sure that the connectivity between the elements and the interrelationships are more clearly explored. They point to each other in a lot of ways. And sometimes if you're doing element and then you do an element here, an element there, you might have to go back and say, oh yeah, we should point to it. So there's a benefit to doing it this way. So turning to stormwater, this map on the screen is see if I can move the people. There we go. I just had to move the faces across to one side. So the watersheds are shown here. So they're different color just to distinguish them. And they're sub watersheds. And the state gives each of the sub watersheds a number, and that's used for evaluating water quality and managing water quality within those watersheds, among other things. They're called HUC 14s. If you're in the engineering business, you call it HUC 14, or planning business. So a municipal stormwater management plan is required pursuant to the land use law. And now it's under the umbrella of the utility plan, even though they're technically two separate documents. And you had an existing stormwater management plan. This is an update to that, and it really reflects the current situation. It establishes the strategies for Princeton to address stormwater related impacts of development or redevelopment. And it contains the policy basis for your stormwater management regulations and your capital planning with respect to stormwater management. And it's really based on the New Jersey Municipal Stormwater Management or Stormwater Regulation Program, which establishes a permitting system through the New Jersey Pollutant Discharge Elimination System and GPDs, which is administered by DEP. So basically, they've said all stormwater now is a pollutant discharge because it carries pollutants with it. Stormwater carries pollutants that it pulls off of the land, which come from all kinds of things, whether it's fertilizer, whether it's carbon based from cars or whatever, or chemicals from some other source. So Princeton has a permit. It's called an MS4 permit, and in order to maintain that Tier A MS4 permit, Princeton has to continue to meet the applicable program requirements, including the adoption of the plan. They had a plan. This is an update to it, so it's part of that. But the rules also require Princeton to maintain ordinances, and there's a whole list of ordinances that are required, and every town is working on these, and they are required to be implemented over the course of years. The DEP, in its wisdom, knew that municipalities probably couldn't do everything at once, so there's a series of actions over years that Princeton will have to take, and in discussions with the engineering department, they are doing everything that they are required to do in terms of meeting the NGDP stormwater management rules and with the stormwater control ordinances, which I said before is more strict than the state requires, which is good. It'll help clean up stormwater better and reduce runoff. And it will comply with the stormwater utility laws, right? Oh, I'm sorry. One thing that's recommended in the plan is the stormwater utility investigation for Princeton. In 2019, New Jersey passed the Clean Stormwater and Flood Reduction Act, which is known as the Stormwater Utility Law, which authorizes local governments to create stormwater utilities. Essentially, like a sanitary sewer utility, you'd have a stormwater utility. And that would allow the assessment of fees and the use of revenue to maintain the stormwater infrastructure and the flooding control infrastructure within Princeton. So the municipality is studying that, and this plan recommends that happen. Additionally, the Inland Flood Protection Rule was just recently adopted, And that is incorporating climate-informed precipitation data into flood management and stormwater management planning. And that, we don't know what the impacts of that are horizontally because it has not been mapped yet by the DEP, but we do know that it's an increase of 2 feet above the previous flood levels. And so we're gonna have to keep an eye on that. But in the interim, areas that are within like the 100 or 500-year flood that have existing buildings or proposals should be looking to increase their finished floor elevations and the degree to which they might impede floodwaters more carefully and with a new eye towards that new flood limit. One of the recommendations that we have is that building heights should be adjusted in order to permit folks to raise buildings out of harm's way with respect to the new climate-informed flood levels without having to get variances and without having to squash their buildings in such a way that it makes the architecture seem kind of deranged because they're trying to fit it in. And that's also, that may also affect historic properties in a large way, because very often you'll find historic properties in the areas where there might be flood hazard areas. Princeton has groundwater recharge areas, mostly in the ridge area and the wooded ridge areas up in the northwestern part of town. Those are the highest recharge areas, and the land use plan envisions the least amount of development or intensity of development in those areas in order to maintain those groundwater recharge areas. But even in areas where groundwater recharge is limited, such as the downtown, the plan seeks to expand the ability to recharge groundwater there through green infrastructure. And so a lot of the recommendations revolve around non-structural stormwater techniques, and that means green infrastructure. Green infrastructure simply means not putting stormwater in a pipe. It means letting stormwater find a way to interact with plant material and with the soils, and then ultimately recharge into the ground, rather than putting it in a pipe and putting the pipe through a curb and putting the curb into a storm inlet and putting the storm inlet into a pipe. And so that's more of a mechanical way. Green infrastructure is a softer way to deal with it. I may be preaching to the choir here. You may have heard all about this before, but this plan really advocates for that. And it recommends, and ultimately it recommends maintaining the permit with the state, doing all that you can ordinance-wise, and also ensuring that you, I'm sorry, I lost my place. And then also prepare a watershed improvement plan in accordance with the permit, which will be coming due, and that will be the way that pollutants are handled locally to deal with the HUC 14s and the pollutant loading within those. That's all I'm going to say about utilities right now and stormwater. I did want to talk a little bit, just very quickly, about what the next. Let's assume that this plan was adopted tonight, which is not going to happen because it's not the public hearing. Once this plan is adopted, this is essentially going to be a punch list of things that the municipality can do on myriad fronts. There will be zoning, there will be ordinance revisions, capital projects, land preservation, among other things. There's going to be a lot of things to do. And one of the things that's important is that not one person is going to do all these things. It's going to be disaggregated to the people who are specialists in this among the municipal staff and professionals and volunteers, board members, governing body members, etc. So one of the things that we're recommending in this is that there be an implementation committee formed, and that implementation committee would distill from the plan that punch list of things that want to happen, and prioritizing those and coordinating and ensuring that there's an ongoing review of what are we doing, what's happening, so that the whole rationale for this plan is to create this holistic framework and basis to move forward with a lot of the ideas. A lot of the ideas in this plan are not new to Princeton. They're just being brought together in this plan so that they form this collective basis. And so now that it's organized, prioritizing, coordinating, and monitoring how these things go is very important. There's so much to do based on this plan. It could seem overwhelming. So having that implementation committee, and I'm agnostic as to how it's developed, but of informed people who can help to guide this plan and implement this plan. So that's what we're recommending an annual review, a re-examination report, which this is also a re-examination report. Didn't really talk about that, but it is required every 10 years minimally. So you will have, assuming this is adopted in 2023, you'll have until 2033 before you have to do a re-examination report. You could do one every 6 months if you'd like. There's no limit to how many you can do. It's probably unnecessary, but I'm just making the point. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be annually reviewing what's going on. And that annual review, when you come to the 10-year point, will make it much easier to check the box and do a re-examination report at that time. So that's really what happens after the plan. As Justin said, this is the beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning. Sorry. I've been talking way too long. The end of the beginning. So once this is memorialized as a policy document, then it's time to begin the implementation. And I think that those implementation committee and annual review will help you do that. So I'm sorry I talked so much. I just wanted to hit as many points as I could. And I hope that I was clear. And there's some things that I did not include in here that were not as important as other things at the time, but this will all be captured within the plan.
Great. So, planning board members, now is our time to pose questions to Justin, to our consultant team. Yeah, so just put your hands up and I am keeping track of whose hands up. So I see you, David. Yeah, I'm hoping we don't necessarily have to go until 11 o'clock if folks don't want to, but we do have, roughly another hour to pepper our folks and each other with questions. And so I look forward to that. And I have a couple myself, but I'm not going to go first. Mr. Cohen, and then Ms. Capizzoli, and then Mr. O'Donnell.
So thank
Go ahead,
you.
David.
Thanks. Thank you, Michael, for really thorough presentation. I love a lot of what I heard. I was especially happy to hear the fairly in-depth discussion about Vision Zero, which I think is an important part of the mobility element and needs work going forward. The one area where I wanted to maybe ask questions or express a little bit of concern is the open space recreation area. I think you alluded to sort of some of the conflicts we've had in town over artificial turf, and yet the need for artificial turf, you sort of danced around it. You talked about the possibility of capturing some more preserved or open space through clustering, but I think we have very few potential properties for large residential subdivisions. So I think that's a little bit of an imaginary solution. And I guess I would like to hope that the subcommittee that had worked on that would have come up with some brilliant solutions, to the need for more playing fields without having to do artificial turf, which has environmental drawbacks and a lot of concerns in the community. And so I don't know if you can address that at all, but that was my one sort of area of concern with what you talked about tonight.
Yeah, I don't think that there's, in terms of the getting to the artificial turf argument, you know, versus natural turf, it's unsettled in the element. We don't, there's nothing that comes out and says, yes, it should be artificial turf. No, it shouldn't be artificial turf. It's really just talking about, this is what was reflected to us from the recreation folks. And so we captured that. But in terms of expanding the ability to use the fields, what methodology, it doesn't really, it's not saying what, it's not going either way. It understands that this is an issue, but it hasn't solved the problem. The element doesn't solve the problem.
And
you
just
don't-
I mean, I was part of the mobility element subcommittee. And the subcommittee members definitely had a concern about artificial turf. So this plan, you know, explicitly does not recommend, but acknowledges that there is pressure for it based on pressure for fields.
Right.
So
So obviously the other solution is to find locations. I don't know if there are, I don't know if there are potential locations. Do we have any farmland that's not preserved farmland, for instance, or that's not historic farmland that would be suitable, as opposed to trying to use, our passive recreation open space, which is environmentally sensitive. I didn't hear anything about that. Or maybe the conclusion is there is no place to put additional fields, but that would be helpful to hear in the element as well. It would give us the guidance, just further define the problem, even if you don't know what the solution is.
Yeah, and I sorry to chime in before everybody, but because the Environmental Commission has dealt with this issue for quite some time. We have done research on this, and we've shared documents, and we've made the stance on turf fields, and so I think that's really the stance of the town's body. I can't really say that it speaks for the town completely, but that's what the Environmental Commission's stance is on that. So I think that the Environmental Commission certainly would like to see a stance be made in the master plan.
In those technical interviews that we had with staff, we had one with the rec director and some members of the rec commission. Then we had one obviously with the open space manager. And the way that the rec director kind of framed it was, we either need more area or more time, meaning lighting and turf and all the things that Michael mentioned. Which shouldn't come as a surprise that's the way he kind of framed it. But then the open space manager, in a different conversation, actually agreed that turf, because of the things it does to then prevent needing more fields and then turning them over and all that, is actually a good solution. The reason I say that is just to say, as we just heard right now, between the PEC and some of our professionals, as well as the conversations over the past couple of years about turf fields, it does not seem like there is a community vision on them. So we can take a look at that. But if it's a 50-50 issue, we're going to have to reflect that it's, still in contention.
If we're looking at places that might be converted to fields, I just as soon look at parking lots as as farm fields or whatever. I mean, it's better use than asphalt, maybe.
Or
anyway,
or
but that's a big space, and I do have a question later on for retrofitting our parking lots in the downtown area. But Was that it, David? Do you have anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Julie?
Hi, thanks. Obviously we're zooming out and doing, kind of some broad thinking, and at the same time, you zoom back in and look at really practical solutions. And that's why I really appreciated at the end having these implementation groups and committees, because I think that there's always going to be issues in elements that are, in the weeds and technical that, people have to spend time working out. And I was just wondering, for historic preservation, there's recommendations for guidelines for the 21 historic districts. There's recommendations for architectural guidelines, which are pretty comprehensive. There's recommendations for signage and outreach, and obviously the CLG component. And, I'm looking at what resources we have right now. We have one person. And I'm just wondering, like, how does this get implemented? I mean, does this become like a department or something, like a new department? Or like, I'm just wondering about that gap between the implementation versus the broad thinking.
Well, I think that when you analyze the scale of what needs to be done, then you can also analyze the scale and the adequacy of the resources you have to accomplish it.
And I will say the HPC, and particularly their master plan subcommittee, really gave so much time and so much expertise to this process. And we could certainly build off of the things that they had already given, whether they're in this plan or just in implementation, and just further kind of use that system to get some of those things done.
Okay, great.
I just want to add one thing. And in the listening sessions, when folks were asked about historic preservation, we heard several times about the need for guidelines. So, maybe the grant source that Justin referred to earlier, maybe that will rise to the top as a priority, just because it was mentioned so many times by members of the public, both who work on historic homes and who live in historic districts.
And that is one thing that we do have funding for from the council. We're just waiting to get an RFP out for that.
Right.
Well, that would be
to it. Mm-hmm.
That would be one district that we're talking about. Guidelines for all 21 districts.
The way that we had described it in the past with this current funding is Central Historic District, the Witherspoon Jackson one, and then kind of an overarching one. I think, the reason those two were included, and I'm sure you know all this, Julie, so I'm just kind of for the benefit of everyone else, was because that's where we see the most applications. But something like the Prospect Ave Historic District, and all the work that's already been done on that might be a different kind of load, or one of the others that has fewer properties or things have already been documented. So really just focusing on those for now, but then continuing to cover them with the overall ones, and then seeing where we're at.
All right. I just wondered, just because we're also looking at applications, and so it just seems like there obviously needs to be an expansion of the staff or attention there. So anyway, that's just my feeling about just the practical implementation, that obviously every element's going to have their implementation committee that's going to want to work out how these things happen,
Yeah, the competition for resources will be stiff.
Yep.
Owen O'Donnell, thanks, Julie.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was a great presentation. I'm really looking forward to this. But I also had questions, and thoughts about implementation myself. A lot of this hinges on reconciling and unifying zoning, our zoning code and ordinances, new ordinances, etc. And that's, I've been hearing about unifying the borough and Princeton zoning for 10 years now, and it still, isn't quite there yet. So, this is going to be a massive undertaking, I feel, to get all this done. And just in general, for myself and for, maybe members of the public as well, how much of the master plan is an aspirational document and how much of it is a blueprint for the council and the planning board to follow and to put into practice? I mean, there are parts here that all the BCCs are going to have to get involved in and make decisions based on this document. So I just want to get kind of your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that, I mean, in general, it's more aspirational in the general and overarching, and then it gets more practical and concrete as you go through it. And the idea behind the master plan is you're creating an umbrella of policies that allow you to be not exactly what it says in here, but very substantially consistent with what it is. And that's the way I look at this. So, the statement, the vision, and then the goals, they're very large, and then they trickle down into much more specific recommendations that folks have been developed through this process. So it contains both, but it's guidance, it's policy guidance. And in the case where you have, if you're making decisions as a municipality about things that, and you compare it to this, you'd want this to be a guide to that, and looking at it through the lens of, we think we should do this. How does this sit with the master plan? Where does it fit within this framework? And so it's a policy guidance document, but it does have some specifics in it as well.
Mm-hmm. And well, like I said earlier, we set out to get an actionable document with, real steps in it. Of course, certain things are more actionable than others. So, I kind of split it down two ways that we can then bring into that implementation group, either, obviously short, medium, and long-term things, but also just kind of the buckets of who's doing what. And as we've kind of discussed, there are certain things we're going to need to get a consultant, and then that takes staff time to work with that consultant. There are certain things that, staff can handle ourselves relatively quickly. Again, relatively being the key word, but also staff can handle it, but it's going to take longer, or it might involve, another study or something like that. And then of course there are the more aspirational things. And I think we'll start to put those in buckets, particularly with the things that are already underway. Code harmonization has began, the guidelines RFP or the SHPO ordinance, that's all began. So there are certain things that we do have head starts. This really isn't, this is not meant to be none of this is going on right now. Fully a good amount of it is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that. I also have one specific question. In the community facilities element, you mentioned that it doesn't call for new facilities, but enhancing current facilities. In the listening sessions that I attended and throughout, we heard a lot about a community center. People really want they want different things from a community center, but that was something that kept coming up and up and up. Is this addressed anywhere in the community facilities plan?
The community center was not part of the plan. Is not part of the plan. There was no clear winner in terms of what the need was for the community center. Like you said, various groups, and this was in a survey, and we heard this at the open house. There was no clear function for the community center. So until there's some more detailed look at that, there's no plan for a community center in the plan.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Alvin McGowan?
Hi, it's a specific question, I guess you could say. And it's, when you were talking about community facilities, you mentioned the schools. Is there a list of of the schools, of the educational facilities? And I guess I'm specifically wondering whether or not the nursery school is just listed somewhere as one of the educational institutions, since of course it's also in a residential neighborhood.
I don't have the plan.
Good question. It's on Lee Avenue, Michael.
I believe on the land use map, it's mentioned as educational.
It's shown as educational on the land use map.
Yeah, we didn't include any specific mention of it in the community facilities, but we could.
Well, did you list the other, like you listed the other educational institutions? I mean, you listed, at least I was getting that impression you had other educational institutions, so the high school, the private school, Hun school. Are they?
They're listed.
Or maybe I'm misunderstanding. Or is there somewhere where you have specific educational institutions mentioned?
Yes,
it could
they
be
are.
an appendix. I mean, they be sitting somewhere in an appendix.
Right. It needs to be in there.
They are. There are lists of the public and private schools in Princeton. So we can, if it's not mentioned, I don't recall it being mentioned. I know that it's on the land use plan as educational, so it can be mentioned.
Okay.
No problem.
Tim, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. If I could just jump in as a member of the subcommittee that talked about that. I don't recall that we inventoried independent preschools. So I'd have to go back and look at the and I think part of the thinking there too is that the nature of preschool is changing as there are more public options and as what used to be private sites are being utilized by the public schools as sort of district preschools. But it's certainly worth some follow-up, I think. And I thanks Mr. McGowan for mentioning that. And I think you have to remember in Princeton, many of the schools, and I don't know, I can't give you a number or percentage, are conditional uses right now. They might not be zoned as for education, but they're have E designations through conditional uses. So, but it's a good point about the preschools. A lot of them change location, but I would recommend that we do follow up with at least an inventory somewhere in the document. Thanks,
Tim.
Elaine.
Nat Bodigheimer.
So thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a comment about two of the things that I just felt were really galvanizing sort of facts gleaned during the course of the planning process were quantitative. One of them was the graphics documenting the mismatch between demand for household size and the size of the housing stock in town. So it's showing basically a need for more smaller units, smaller household accommodations than is presently on the market. There's another of the graphics that was referred to earlier this evening that had to do with the number of people who are commuting into Princeton for employment compared to the number of people who live in Princeton who are working in Princeton for their employment. it just, those quantitative elements made me think that one of the things that ought to be a companion to the master plan are performance metrics, because I feel if, you know, we're talking a lot about whether this is a blueprint for actions that will take place, but I think it's also really critical that this plan have objectives so that future councils can ask the question, are we making progress towards our objectives? So, you know, and what does that, how does that motivate actions that we may want to take on the implementation side? And so I wanted to just suggest a couple of possible quantitative metrics. I understand that it may be beyond the resources and scope of this current planning process to actually include specific quantitative metrics with quantitative goals as part of this process. I understand how much effort it takes in order to collect the information and to do the benchmarking so that you have a baseline for an objective that you want to make progress to over time. But I don't think it's beyond the resources of the planning effort to identify metrics that it would in future be helpful to begin to quantify and to set goals for as part of a follow-on master plan implementation process. And so on the housing side, I think an example of a quantitative goal for housing would be to reduce the share of single family homes as a component of the overall housing stock in Princeton by a given percentage by 2030 and by another given percentage by 2040. Again, so that there's an ability to report against that progress against that goal, and you know, the matchup of the housing supply and the kinds of households that want and or need to live in Princeton in order to meet Princeton employers' employment goals and the community sustainability goals and our transit and bike and other sort of mobility goals. On the mobility side, I wanted to suggest a couple of other quantitative mobility goals. One of them is to reduce the single occupant vehicle share of in-commuting, again, by some percentage amount by 2030 and by a larger percentage amount by 2040. Another one would be to increase the share of bike, walk, and transit trips for trips that are originating in Princeton. People who are starting their trip, whether it's a work trip or some other kind of trip, you know, and make that a percentage goal increase by 2030 and another one by 2040. Doubling the share of bike and walk trips to school is another, I think, important metric that would show whether we're making progress on our goals. Again, the kind of thing that planning staff or other staff can report to council on an annual basis. Are we making progress, or are these just words, you know, against the stated objectives in the plan? And I think to Councilman Cohen's point about the importance of Vision Zero language is that there needs to be a bike and pedestrian safety goal. You know, I'm not sure exactly what that is, whether it's miles of protected pathways and sidewalks, or whether it's measuring the, you know, traffic safety incidents, but I think it was really important to have quantitative goals, if not numerically established as part of this master plan update, then at least some kind of consensus around what things we should be measuring in order to achieve our goals and measure and report on them over time.
Great suggestions. Thank you. Jack Taylor and then Mia Sachs. Jack, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Mia, wouldn't you? I think you're next.
Oh, I'm sorry. Your hand was up before Mia's, but I'm happy to go in whatever.
All right. Well, just a couple of quick comments. First of all, in my professional experience, nothing is more challenging than the kind of community plan that we've just heard summarized. And I think real congratulations are owed to our consultants and especially to Justin for the magnificent way in which the community has been mobilized. I think it's just superbly done. And then tonight, and it's even more crisp when you look at the plan itself. It's just beautifully put together. And what it calls for, my second comment, is an implementation committee. 3 cheers. Michael, I know you weren't talking to me alone, but I heard you first and foremost and loudest. To me, a key factor of success, and Julie, you made the same comment, is the implementation process and an annual review. To that, I say hooray. My third comment, Michael, I'll just make it one more time publicly. In some language, perhaps AAA rating is not the right language. In some language, in a vision statement, it's always been my view, my value, that some kind of financial value should be stated, particularly when Princeton, among cities of our size, indeed among cities everywhere, is an outstanding performer. We are unusually strong in our financial position, and it's consistent with the image, the vision that we want to maintain, and some appropriate reference makes me more comfortable. Just one final comment. The language of Vision Zero is completely new to me, and perhaps just a general observation. If that is as important as I sense it is from Justin, I want to be very clear that I understand better, and maybe the reader needs to. What exactly does Vision Zero mean, and why is it important?
Yeah, Vision Zero is a vision for 0 fatalities and injuries related to streets. Simply put.
I would say it's more than that, and it's pairing not just enforcement and education, but street design, like Michael said, data gathering and analysis to point out where those intersections or areas are that we have issues, and really, identifying car crashes and fatalities as a huge problem that we would not deal with for, other types of deaths. And then throwing everything we have at it to make sure it's no more.
Right.
But I'm also happy to sit down one-on-one and discuss some of the things that other towns have done, Jack. I think your pool is probably closed now, but maybe in the sunroom or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Thank you. I'll buy the coffee.
Perfect.
Mia Sachs.
I just want to say, Jack, that Councilman Cohen is leading a Vision Zero task force, and he also would be a good resource for explaining what Vision Zero is about. And speaking of task forces, the council had a community center task force that was the impetus for that was a large petition signed by a wide swath of community centers for the municipality to investigate the creation of a community center. And I think I wanted to underscore the challenge of including this in the master plan because there was such a disparate view of what a community center is. Traditionally, the community center that was in our old master plan was sort of a 1950s, just general youth recreation, some weights and maybe a pool and a place where you could get together and bake or sew or whatever. But the petition for the community center came out of a group of people who had wanted to provide support for a certain disadvantaged sectors of our community, and they had specifically in mind transitional housing, drug treatment, language training, job support, which is very different than the sort of mid-50s vision that had been in our original master plan. And then, of course, there are a bunch of other different groups that have asked for the community center to, for example, provide daycare or augment some of the services that our senior center provides, immunizations. And then there's been a whole movement for community schools within our school district, which also serves some of the a variety, a wide swath of what is considered to be in the range of what a community center would provide. So I think the council has tried to figure out what is not already being provided, and we really don't want to duplicate efforts that already exist in the community, either after school care, in particular the Y. I think our approach at present is to want to reinforce and support those services that are already provided, whether the construction of an actual facility, a community center is needed. And this was part of the discussion, is a community center a general concept, it's sort of an abstract concept that one proponent of it described it. She said it's not a physical facility, it's a general concept of providing community services. And then for others, it was an actual physical facility. And one of the issues with providing the actual facility was that the wide range of services that different residents wanted provided were not necessarily best provided all in the same facility, in terms of, having young children be in the same facility with other services that were being provided. So I just want to say, like, a community center on the surface sounds like the most innocuous, simple thing. A community center, you build a building and, you put, but it's actually, in terms of what people in right now believe it is or should provide, and how to parse out what is already being provided and how not to duplicate that. It's actually, unfortunately, like so many other issues, much more complex than it might appear initially. And how poor Michael Sullivan translates that into 3 lines in a master plan, I have no idea. But
I'm really glad you said all that, Mia, because well, first of all, I knew a fraction of it, and it's really good to have more context there. And I, like Owen, heard people talk about community center needs at the listening sessions, at least 2 of them. The sharpest vision, the clearest vision for one was articulated at the Spanish language listening session, and it was really it was described by the folks there as a civic center, as a place where it was the vision that Mia described, that focuses on jobs and connecting people with jobs and one-stop shopping for various kinds of support services and that kind of thing. But anyway, it is something that came up, and you're absolutely right. It's very complicated. And
yeah, and I agree totally. But I do just want to add that to your point, and I know you know this, but to your point about services that are available elsewhere that would be duplicated. Unfortunately, what I heard was, for a lot of these people, those services cost money that's beyond their means, whether it's the Y or whatever else. So, that's just something else that, as we move forward, we can think about.
Yeah.
And we do mention, this history and this discussion in the community facilities element. We also mention the services the public library has, the YW and the YMCA and others. But this is just, again, another one of those areas where, with all the outreach, and then the steering committee and all the other work, nothing really bubbled up to lead us one way or another.
Yeah. Tim Quinn and then Zenon.
Thanks. Thanks, Madam Chair. Yes, I think that in the subcommittee that discussed community facilities, there was a long, robust discussion about a community center, and we really did cover a lot of the points that Councilwoman Sachs mentioned. I don't want to take up too much time because I know, I've been more involved than other members of the board as a member of the master plan subcommittee. But I didn't want to let the evening end without piggybacking off of what Mr. Taylor said, expressing gratitude for the process, for both on the planning offices and the extraordinary community. I don't think that there's been a community outreach program that's been as wide, as far reaching and comprehensive since the efforts to consolidate the two municipalities. And I think Justin put in a lot of time over and above what he's compensated for to make sure that that every voice was given the opportunity to be heard. And the steering committee, those discussions were ensuring that everyone had the opportunity to be heard, and that if we heard that one segment wasn't being heard, how could we reach that segment and what could we do? And a lot of times it involved Justin saying, I'll go out there, in the plaza with the table, or I'll go to this neighborhood group. And it was just an extraordinary amount of work. And similarly, our consultants did, I think, extraordinary work too. Princeton is not just any town, right? And I think that the residents feel that way. And certainly when you ask for opinions in Princeton, you're going to get them in spades. You're going to get a full laundry list of them. And I think the way that the process worked here, I think was as well as it could have been, as it could have gone with a budget that we were given. And I think that now why we had a master plan that was from 1996, because this is a 1.5 to 2 year process that we've been through. And all of that time was taken to make sure that it was done right, that it was done specific to Princeton, that we weren't going to take Asbury Park's plan, as good as it was, and just, drop in our stuff, that we wanted something that was specific to Princeton. So kudos to all who were involved. I know that the people who dealt with the land use element had many more subcommittee meetings than we had with community facilities and with the mobility elements. And I'm sure that was time well spent, because those are key sort of tensions in town about land use. So kudos to them. And Justin, if you could just, for the public, before we get out of here, and I'm not suggesting that we adjourn, Councilman Cohen has
That's
his
not your
hand.
job anyway.
It's not my job. It's Councilman Cohen's job, and he has his hand raised, and I don't think he's raising his hand to adjourn.
I hope not.
But could you describe the path to what we hope will be approval, what the next dates are, what the public hearings are going to? I know that we're still having discussions. The planning board leadership is still having discussions about what those what the public hearings are going to look like. But after you listen to Councilman Cohen's wisdom, if you could just sort of, for the benefit of the 32 people who are still with us, review what the timeline toward our approval is and implementation into 2024. Just stop the recording. Again, I maxed out the
Another
recording
hiccup.
by giving a big speech.
That's
Just
like the
like-
music at the
just like
Academy Awards.
Just like Sullivan, right? You can't give the microphone to Irishmen, or they'll take it until you unplug. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Tim. David, you want to pose a question or make a comment before Justin talks about next steps?
Yeah, I had two things. I feel a little bit anticlimactic after Tim's wrap up comments, but I just one question I wanted to ask in response to Nat's suggestion that we have these metrics is a question for Michael as to whether that's the sort of thing that actually gets included in master plans. It seems to me it belongs more in the work of the implementation committees that was talked about, but and I also realize we're too close to the end of this process to try and add that in at this point. But the question, I guess, is should that be one of the early tasks to try and for our next reexamination to get metrics in there, or is that something that would more appropriately reside outside of the master plan document itself, but somewhere in the planning board's purview?
Well, I think that metrics are certainly could find a home in a master plan. And there's nothing wrong with doing it. The issue, they have to be measurable, and you have to have some idea of your ability to measure them. We rely on data from other folks, right? We rely on data from the American Community Survey. We rely on data from the census. We rely on data from other sources. And the frequency of those, there's going to be a census, or we assume there's going to be a census every 10 years. Sometimes it gets delayed. But, so on a 10-year increment, anything that the census measures, you should be able to do. The American Community Survey is measuring more frequently. But some of these things would, for instance, how do you measure the number of folks that are driving in versus those folks who are taking that's on the ground. There's got to be systems set up to find a way to measure that, because it's going to have to be something that's done over time. So I think that there are some simple things you certainly could know from a building permit standpoint, because the state has building permits, what types of units you would know if you were getting more multifamily units or smaller units. You should be able to know that. But I don't know enough about the construction permitting to know how detailed that could be. But that's the key, is like, you can have a metric, but it's got to be measurable. And so that's the key. And I think that at this stage, I think it could be added. It could be a subsequent to this. You could look at the implementation committees, and you can say, okay, we're going to implement this. What is our measure for success? Is it X, X, X? Okay, how are we going to measure that? And I think that could be done that way, and wouldn't necessarily have to be in here. So that's my comment.
And a lot of these things are things that, we as an organization, and especially as a planning department, can and should be doing on an ongoing basis. The problem is we haven't done that. So creating that foundation is what needs to be done. And we're beginning to do that. And, thankfully the council has funded my old position, created that.
Right.
Which
sounds like a job for Ian.
Exactly. Right now working on GIS maps to build that foundation, and then we could use other types of programs and gather the data, like Michael said. And I know this probably sounds like a pipe dream to, have a 36 person planning department, but really there are towns smaller than us that have GIS analysts within their planning department, or have the Office of Economic Development, like Michael said, and other things like that we can and should be doing. But the problem, or at least what stands in our way, is the backlog of code harmonization, modernization, everything else. But it's certainly
Right.
something we want to do.
So the one other comment that I wanted to make, and Owen, is helpful information, for you to share that in the conversations about community center, that the services that may already be offered in town are beyond people's means. But I think that it still makes sense not to duplicate existing services, but rather for the municipality to collaborate with groups that are already providing those services and make sure that they're available to people, who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford them and stuff like that. So it's just a comment in response to that.
I would just add, with regard to the implementation committee, or implementation task force, or whatever it would ultimately be called, which I think we all agree is a great idea. It would be good for that group to have a charge, a specific charge, and that charge could include the creation, working with staff, of these metrics, and we can talk in another forum about the creation of that group. To my mind, it is implementation is really about council action. and so it is, in my view, sort of the council's prerogative to establish an implementation committee, and we should just have some conversations about that before the end of the year, not in detail at these hearings necessarily, but so that we can hit the ground running once the plan is adopted. Owen O'Donnell, you have another question?
Thank you, I do. Talking about metrics and things that aren't included in the plan reminded me of something that Michael mentioned early on when talking about housing. You mentioned specifically that it seemed like specifically did not include a density standard. Is this something that's often included in a master plan? And if it is, what might we be missing by not having that?
The land use plan does include ranges of density anticipated for some of the residential land use districts. And it's in there because it's trying to give a sense of the relative intensity of these districts to each other. It does not suggest that you need to include a density standard. And from our perspective, some of these areas are already, I think, 14 units per acre at some level in the inner neighborhoods. And because it's not the plan to regulate according to density, it's a plan to regulate according to what fits in the neighborhood and within the existing framework of lots and buildings, so that the spatial character is not disturbed in a way that would change the course of it. These neighborhoods are all desirable, and they're different. They all have different intensities of development. So using a density standard, if you're on raw land, it's very telling. In a developed area or largely developed area, it's not so important, particularly if you're trying to interstitially and incrementally add units here and there, but within that same framework. So that the point about the housing prototypes was that they all look kind of like a single family house in a lot of ways, but they have multiple units in it, and that's the idea. So density is not something, it's there for relative measurement, but not really for measurement, just to get a sense of it. And I'm not recommending, or the plan is not recommending, using density to regulate those areas.
Okay, great, thank you.
What fits is well put. I think you're channeling Bob Geddes, right? His last book was called Fit, an Architect's Manifesto. So that's a great segue into a question that I had, I think it is anyway, about what the land use plan says about retrofitting underutilized areas of downtown. And by that, I really mean surface parking lots, many of which downtown, behind businesses, for example, between Park Place and Nassau Street, are, sort of, but between Dome Alley and the other, and that interior, surface parking. Does the plan envision retrofitting those areas in ways that, well, I'll just stop and ask if the plan envisions anything specific about the right way to make use of that kind of space in the downtown when we specifically want to add housing downtown.
Well, the plan talks about first increasing the ability to create new homes or new units, dwellings downtown. It also talks about the need to reduce or eliminate off-street parking requirements that may be restricting that ability. And if there are existing parking lots which are required now and may not be required in the future, then that would open up those areas to potentially be redeveloped for commercial with residential above it, or mixed use, or whatever you want to say. But
and I'm not suggesting that parking should necessarily go away forever, but it could go underground.
yeah,
well,
there's nothing to prohibit other than geology and groundwater parking underground, but freeing up these sites so that they're more flexible, they have more options, and they're and perhaps more valuable, that incentivizes private development to look at those solutions, is what this plan's trying to do.
Okay.
And a lot of those parking lots, whether it's over on Harrison Street in the so-called dental district, or if it's closer to Jugtown where we have acres of parking lot, that's what we've asked for through our master plan, through our ordinances. So then having this kind of, again, toolkit of different ways that we could change those ordinances would, peel that back, or put another way, if they came in right now with the exact minimum number of parking and said they wanted to get rid of it, that'd be a very big uphill battle at a planning board or a zoning board.
Justin, that is the first time I've heard
I'm getting it started.
Dental district. I live very near the dental district. I had no idea. That's great.
I envision an arch one day with two big toothbrushes.
Perfect. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I look forward to that. Are there any? I see no hands raised at the moment. Any, Mr. Muller, Jerry Muller, you had your hand raised earlier. Is there anything that you wanted to ask or add before we?
No, not at this point.
Okay, good. Last call for comments or questions. It's 10:51. Well, this has been really good discussion. Sorry, go ahead, Zenon.
Sorry, I didn't put my hand up again.
That's
Sorry,
right.
I put my hand down because I had a bit of a situation. So I was just wondering if it's still possible to make comments, as steering committee member or planning board member. There were some small things that I noticed that I don't want to get into now, but
yes, and that's actually a really good segue and invitation for Justin to talk about the process from here on out. I'm sure he'd welcome hearing whatever you have to say last minute or not. Sure. Justin, you want to summarize where we go from here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to tackle that, basically, if you want to send them to me as soon as possible, we'll see what we can do with them. But to try to stick to the schedule, November 9th is when we have the hearing slated, with the potential to carry it to November 30th if need be, or I shouldn't say carry it, but extend it to November 30th. Again, because that is the time for public comment. I don't know. I'll have to talk to Michael. We're obviously not going to have a 4-hour presentation again. We'll see how much we need at the beginning. Like I started the meeting out by saying, there's a requirement that the plan itself is on file 10 days before which would be October 30th. Clarke Caton Hintz has, 4 or 5 people working round the clock on this plan to get this done. So we're really hopeful that, definitely it gets done by then, but I'd love it if it happened earlier, so we could give people more time to review, maybe, the week before that weekend, the 30th is a Monday. Once we have that document, we'll be sure to put out press releases, put it in the newsletter. I'll send it to all the board members, and do all those things so people know it's out. But of course, we were having meetings up until this week. There are still formatting, things need to be formatted. Their maps need to be looked at. If we have any further comments, especially if it's something, huge, that's going to affect that. And one other thing I should mention, we have on the schedule a steering committee meeting on the 30th. If we need that, I don't know if we will. So that's kind of up in the air right now as we continue to get through this. Part of the reason I say that is because if that meeting is on the 30th and the document's already on file, there's not much we could do. So we could meet to wrap up, but again, like most things here, try to make sure there's a practical reason to do them. So I guess just to reiterate, the key dates are October 30th at the latest to get the document out, November 9th for that hearing.
Okay. And we'll talk between now and the 9th. When I say we, I mean planning board leadership and Justin and some other folks who will about exactly how that meeting will flow. I don't want to start engaging Q&A after every speaker. And I'm sure that members of the public will have lots of questions. So we'll figure out, what's a good and efficient way of handling public comment and addressing questions that are raised in public comment. There being no other comments as far as I can see and no other business. I'm looking at you, David.
Councilman.
It's so hard to see who you're looking at when we're on Zoom.
I could be looking at anyone.
I do move to adjourn.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Michael. Thank you.
Good
Thank you, Ian.
Great questions, great comments. Thanks a million, Michael and Justin
Yeah.
and Elaine.
And thank you, Louise and Tim.
Good night.
Night.